Maybe they're waiting to do that. Good afternoon. Oh, now I can hear it. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the March 12th meeting of the Board of Commissioners of First Five of Los Angeles. Ms. Vo, will you please call the meeting, call our roll, and share our public comment process, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maricela Ramirez.
Here.
Julie Tarrin. Here. Barbara Ferrer.
Here.
Astrid Hager.
Here.
Abigail Marquez.
Here.
Summer McBride.
Here.
Carol Sagala.
Here.
Brandon Nichols.
Here.
Justin Blakely.
Here.
Robert Byrd.
Here.
Deanne Tilton Durfee.
Here.
Jacqueline McCroskey.
Here.
And Holly Mitchell.
Present.
Quorum is present. I wanted to take a moment to share brief remarks on our public comment process. Thank you so much for our community members coming today to provide public comments. And for today's public comments, given that we are receiving public comments for in-person as well as on Zoom, and we have also received emailed public comments, I want to take a moment to let you know that to ensure that we allow time for public comments, we're going to be taking 10 public comments in person first, and then we're going to rotate to online for Zoom, and then we're going to go back to in-person, and we would do that rotation until we're complete. I do also want to let the public know that today's meeting does include interpretation. There will be Khmer as well as Spanish interpretation for the Zoom attendees as well as in person. And with that, I'll hand this back to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Vo, and let me just clarify for us and the public. The general public comment for items not on the agenda happen at the end of the meeting, and that's when we'll go through that rotation, 10 in person, or will we do that rotation for each agenda item where we hear public comment? Will we use that same process?
That is correct. Depending on the volume that is received for any particular item, if there is a voluminous amount received, we will do that rotation. However, if there is only one public comment received for, let's say, item 6, we would just handle item 6.
Beautiful. So again, just to make sure the public is clear, each agenda item, we take public comment. It's the expectation that you speak to that agenda item. If you have general public comment on items that aren't on the agenda, that happens at the end of the meeting for general public comment, and that's when you talk about things that aren't on the agenda. Want to make sure everybody is clear and that we've got our process. Thank you so much. Again, you heard that we have a quorum present, so we'll call the meeting to order. Again, we're going to lose quorum at 4:30, so I'm going to drive this train, board members. Buckle up. We're going to get through this to make sure that we have enough time to hear public comment. Ms. Vo, did you also talk about how much time each member of the public would have?
We have not yet. We are still numerating and counting up our public comments received. Once we receive the total amount, we can do an assessment of how much time is allocated for public comments based on how far we are in the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I really want to thank the commissioners for your flexibility as we work together as efficiently as possible. And I missed the last meeting. Thank you, Commissioner McBride, for chairing in my absence. And I want to add my congratulations and welcome to our new commissioner. So welcome. We're going to have a good time together. I appreciate serving with you. There are no AB 2449 requests for remote participation at this meeting. Moving on to agenda item 3. Item 3 is an information item from closed session, so our counsel will report on this item. Ms. Young.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So earlier, just before the regular meeting, there was a closed session related to personal evaluation of the President and CEO, and there was discussion amongst the commissioners, but no reportable action was taken during that meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's proceed on to agenda item number 4, which is an action item, colleagues. It's our consent agenda. We're going to hear from JR. Who's going to, and so we're, okay. So consent items for consideration are items 4A through D. It's consent, so we're not going to have a presentation. We will now take public comment on the consent items, which are items 4A through D. Ms. Fo, any public comment?
Confirming there are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. With that, please, I'll entertain a motion to accept consent. Thank you. A second. Thank you. Ms. Sagala, second. Please call roll.
Maricela Ramirez.
Aye.
Julie Taryn.
Aye.
Barbara Ferrer.
Aye.
Astrid Hager. Abigail Marquez. Summer McBride.
Aye.
Kara Sagala.
Aye.
Brandon Nichols.
Aye.
And Holly Mitchell.
Aye.
Motion is passed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on, colleagues, to agenda item 5, which is a report for your chair. So again, it's great to be with everybody, and I really appreciate you all giving of your time and your expertise and the heart that you bring to this work every day, and particularly when we come together as First Five. You know, we are, as we have discussed, in what feel like uncertain times, as the policy and political climate and the landscape shifts. It's really important, I think, that we have the opportunity to come together as community to talk about children and families in a holistic and caring way. And we all are navigating changing policies. I certainly, HR 1, many of you as well, evolving state guidance, and the reality of constrained public resources. And so while the details may continue to evolve, what remains constant is our shared responsibility to ensure families with young children are not left behind. And I just wanted to share with you that in that spirit, I was very proud. My office advanced a motion recently before the Board of Supervisors entitled Strengthening Early Childhood Prevention and Family Stability, using the Superior Court of LA County's Hope Court program as a model. Amen. And it seeks to strengthen early childhood prevention and family stability by expanding and institutionalizing the Hope Court model. HOPE stands for Helping Our Parents Excel. If you don't know about it, haven't gone to visit it, I encourage you to do so. We're really excited, aren't we?
Yes, we
to
are.
expand this pilot countywide. So it's something I'm proud of, and I just wanted to share with all of you. So again, I want to thank you for your willingness to engage in deep, complex conversations that invest your energy into solutions that make First Five an important force in our county, and I would go so far as to say the state. We are doing the work to make sure that 0 to 5 have a voice in every public policy room that we all have the opportunity to enter. I want to welcome my new vice chair, Mr. Nichols. I want to acknowledge Social Worker Appreciation Month. And with that, there's no public comment on my report, right, Ms. Fo?
That is correct, Madam Chair. There are no public comments on your comments.
Thank you very much, because I am the public. That's right. Moving on to agenda item number 6. Again, it's our president's report. We are, as a result of our time constraints today, going to refer you to her report, which is in writing in the agenda. Do you have a few remarks you want to add on top of that, or no? No. Okay. So the president's report is in the agenda. It's been made available for the public. Let me see, Ms. Vo, if there are any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment on the president's report.
Confirming there are no public comments on the president's report.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to agenda item 7, which is our federal and state budget update. Let's go ahead and have our presenters come and share, oh, the news. Oh, the news. Chris, great to see you from the California Budget and Policy Center. and our very own Adia, Vice President of Community Engagement and Policy. Appreciate you both. Hey, Chris. Let me just say, colleagues, while they're setting this up and to the public, you know, Chris leads a very important, nonpartisan think tank that I certainly have relied on for decades to be my source for research and understanding of the state budget. And the fact that you fly here to LA to present this information is incredibly valuable, and that is not lost on us. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like you, we want to welcome Chris Haney for coming back. We invited him back given the continuously and rapidly changing landscape. We want to make sure that we have accurate information and so that we can remain adaptive and responsive. Therefore, we've asked him to share his perspective on what's happening at the federal level, the impact on the state, and also the governor's proposed budget for 2026-2027, and key elements that are included in the governor's spending plan. So we do want to assure you that First 5 LA leadership and our policy team, we're closely monitoring the governor's proposed budget and the impacts of the federal decisions on LA County's children, young children and families. And we invite your input to make sure that we can so that it can inform the analysis and the development of our policy work in the coming months. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Great, thank you very much, and it's a real honor to be back with you. Please know that if you ask, we will come. We exist as an organization because our mission is to improve the outcomes for low-income communities, children, families, people of color, those who've been traditionally underrepresented or not been able to equally share in the success of our state. And part of that mission is to say yes when you all call. And so we appreciate the invitation. I'm honored to be here. Always, it seems like I wish I could come here and say, I wish I was coming with better news.
I know. It's not your fault, Chris.
But we are in troubling times, and I also want to say it's always a pleasure to be back in Los Angeles. When I was a rookie public policy person in graduate school, this was the place I cut my teeth. And so I have a deep affinity. I walk downtown and I walk by places where I did interviews with elected officials at a very different time in the city's history. And so I also am, despite the times, very grateful for the political leadership that surrounds this community. And I've been here the last several weeks in various formats and been very inspired by the public officials, their plans, the innovation they're showing in trying to respond to the coming maelstrom of H.R. 1. It doesn't mean that we'll fix everything, but there is so much innovation in the public sector happening that deserves a lot more credit than I think we understand, and it's going to take even more of it. But I'm inspired by the leadership I see in this region. I hope we can spread it around the state and that we can carry that message back to state leaders so that they can spread it as well. So I'm going to do a few things today. I'm going to review the context coming into this state budget, just in terms of what state leaders were dealing with as they started this year's process, share our own perspective on the governor's proposal, and I want to say, yes, we're nonpartisan, and yes, we're independent, but we have a perspective. We're here to work on behalf of the people I talked about. It's part of our mission. So we have viewpoints, and though what we say will be guided by what we think the governor and state leaders are doing or not doing for those communities. We're going to describe some of the key elements of the governor's plans and then tell a little bit about what we think is coming next. I don't need to say much here. You're all here because you know the state budget matters. But I do want to stress in this time that I think, particularly from a public policy perspective in Sacramento, there are way too many people, and you certainly know this well, Supervisor, from your experience, who view the budget itself as an outcome. The budget itself is a tool. It is a process for producing outcomes. That is true whether we are flush with cash or whether we are facing a gigantic decline in federal support for the programs that we care about. And so it doesn't, from our perspective, it doesn't matter whether the times are good or the times are bad. The measurement is whether we're doing better for the people we're trying to serve. And so budgets are about that. We don't see a balanced budget as a positive outcome. It's a requirement. It has to happen anyway. It's about what happens for the people of California. There's sort of old news and new news, of course, when you start with the context that we're facing in terms of what state leaders start out with this year. The old news, unfortunately, is that in California, we still have very high rates of poverty, 1 in 5 people experiencing poverty according to federal measures. If you look at other measures in this state, 40% of the state is one significant expense away from being in poverty. So it's the sort of, this situation has been true for the last 20, 25 years. We're facing widening inequality, concentration of wealth at the very, very, very top, and I'm not talking just 1%, I'm talking like 0.1% versus like everybody in the middle at the bottom. And the gap between earnings and corporate profits is widening in an even more significant way, particularly as we came out of COVID and then dealt with supply chain issues and now some of the changes at the federal level. That's kind of stuff we've known about. The new stuff, of course, is what's happening with H.R. 1, the bill that was passed in this last year. And just as a sort of reminder about what's there, we're talking about essentially $1.3 trillion in cuts, primarily to Medi-Cal and to CalFresh, that were done purposefully to offset the costs of tax cuts that are primarily going to high wealth households and to corporations. So that's the context that we're facing, that implementation of H.R. 1, which is now real, although it phases in over a 5-year period. And what we are talking about in terms of major takeaways, I'll outline in just a second. But I want to say why that matters in such a big way for the state is there are a couple of reasons. There's first, like, what it means for the state budget, which I would argue is not minor, but the lesser of the concerns, but significant, which is the state of all, if you add up all the state budget funds and you look at what comes in from the federal government, about a third of the funding that is spent in the state in any given year at the state level is coming in from the federal government. The vast majority of that is coming in for health and human services programs. So Medi-Cal, CalFresh, CalWORKS, SSI, SSP, et cetera. So the two systems are, particularly when it comes to health and human services, are fundamentally intertwined. But the other reason that we're fundamentally concerned is about the people impacts of H.R. 1. And what we know from early estimates is that up to 2 million Californians could lose their Medi-Cal coverage, and of course the state could lose tens of billions of dollars flowing in. I want to be very careful for folks to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean the tens of billion dollars of deficit for the state. It means dollars that aren't flowing in because people don't have access to health care. Over 3 million households are poised to lose some or all of their food assistance. In total, the SNAP or CalFresh costs, there'll be a cost shift, first time in history, to the state government. This has been always a federally funded program. There'll be a cost shift to the state of in the $2 to $5 billion range. And here again, to offset tax cuts that were very disproportionately weighted toward those at the top. So those are the high-level things that state leaders knew were on their plate when they came into the year. So the governor released a budget proposal in January, or a vague framework of a proposal. This is a pretty lean framework relative to prior budgets. That we're going to argue, you'll hear me talk about this other thing, fails to meet the moment, right? We know H.R. 1's in place. We know what the state is dealing with, and the budget proposal largely doesn't have responses to what's happening at the federal level, and instead seems to be taking a wait-and-see approach to how it deals with it. Now, a couple things just to back up and say where we are. This part's true of almost any given budget year. Most expenditures at the state level go to health and human services. If you look at across several funds, over 40% of the state budget goes to health and human services. The next biggest level is K through 12 education, and thereafter everything's pretty small. If you're actually just looking at the state general fund, what is in essence the state checking account, you see much larger percentages even in the health and human services space, and here again in K through 12 education. But just to sort of say, like, it's not minor when we see major federal hits come in Health and Human Services, and then when the state has to figure out what to do about that and doesn't also have its own revenue conversation, then those cuts end up having to translate into state-level cuts. The governor's plan, all that federal stuff aside, however, has a few things that are worth noting. First, it starts in a place of extremely strong revenue growth. We are expecting, or the governor is expecting, significant growth in revenues. We're already experiencing significant growth in revenues over what had been projected in June when this year's budget was enacted. The governor projected a relatively small deficit. I'll talk more about that. And because revenues are growing, there's an increase in the state's reserves. So these sort of parts are actually not necessarily bad news in terms of just the state budget in its own microcosm. The details there are that the governor is projecting the general fund revenue over the 3-year window, the year we closed out just recently, where we know what's happened with the revenues more concretely, the fiscal year we're in now, and the next fiscal year, that revenues are coming in $42 billion higher than what was projected last June. So that's good news. The Legislative Analyst's Office, the budget office for the legislature, had projected a less rosy picture when they came out with their projections before the governor's proposal. They have, however, since adjusted those up, and they now are saying that they think the governor's proposals aren't even totally covering the extent of the revenue growth. And all of this is because of the continued growth of the stock market, performance of the stock market, largely driven by the growth of the AI sector. And that's all sort of near term. Like revenue collections monthly are coming in significantly higher than what the state had anticipated. The governor, like I said, projects a small deficit, about $3 billion. That's on a $250 billion general fund. So $3 billion is real, but relatively manageable from a budget management perspective. Want to say both the Department of Finance at the state level and the Legislative Analyst's Office, as solid as they are going to get those numbers wrong. Nobody can project a budget that starts on July 1st and runs through June 30th of next year and what's going to happen with the stock market. So in May, they'll have tax collections from about 2/3 of us around the state, and they'll know a little bit more concretely what the revenue looks like. So just want to say, like, hold your breath. We don't know for sure that any of what I just said is true, and that's why the governor's May revision will be a very big deal in terms of having a better sense of what the picture looks like for the budget. The governor projects, though, because of growing revenues that are reserve funds, some of which are driven by formulas that are in the Constitution, put there by voters, that we will see reserves grow to over $20 billion. So here again, $20 billion on a $250 billion general fund. About $14 billion of that's in the main formula-driven, constitutionally protected budget stabilization account. $4 billion of it is in a similar account that's just for K through 12 and community colleges, and then there's this kind of discretionary pot that's left over that's about $4.5 billion. You all will know this pot well. This is where money comes from for things like responding to wildfire emergencies and the like. So over $20 billion in reserves, all driven by the fact that the revenues largely would go up. So if revenues go up higher, reserves will get stronger. Then I want to note that the governor's proposal doesn't include any new revenue solutions. And this is fundamentally, I want to say, this is fundamentally the issue of why there are no responses to H.R. 1. Because the state does not have the money to one-for-one backfill the losses at the federal level. The only way it could even begin to start is if it actually does more than just deal with the spending side of the budget, and it actually starts to ask questions about what's the state going to do to raise additional revenues to make sure people have health care or food assistance. There isn't anything in the governor's proposal as of January that discusses those types of solutions at this point. So let's talk a little bit then, just like issue area by issue area. I'm going to start with health because, of course, this is where the biggest impacts lie for children and families. I want to start actually by just sort of saying, before we talk about this year's proposal, that we're also in a current fiscal year that is one where the state started to make its own cuts this past year. So in the current fiscal year, state leaders began to restrict immigrants' ability to access Medi-Cal, freezing enrollment starting January 1st, 2026. This was a proposal the governor and the legislature agreed to last year because Medi-Cal costs started to increase in ways that were significantly above what they projected. So not good timing because it comes right on top of the fact that H.R. 1 was coming out and starting to be implemented. And then the state started to put in other rollbacks, like imposing work requirements on undocumented Californians. Or I'm sorry, this is this year's budget proposal. The governor is now proposing some further rollbacks that look a lot like H.R. 1, unfortunately. So in Medi-Cal, there is a federally funded part of the program, the big part of the program, but there's also a state-funded part of it. The governor is proposing in his budget that in the state-funded portion, the same work requirements, the paperwork requirements that kick people off the system would be included at the state level, just like at the federal level. And they're saying this is, in order to just like have administrative consistency or administrative equity, as they called it. But it's an option they do not have to do, right? They can maintain higher level standards in the state part of the Medi-Cal system. So this is a place the legislature and advocates are pushing back hard on already. And then there's a continued denial of state-funded Medi-Cal to immigrant populations who would be losing their access to Medi-Cal starting October 1st. So I just want everyone to understand that, like, right now, the responses coming out of state leaders to H.R. 1 are not to undo the damage of H.R. 1, they're actually to exacerbate the damage of H.R. 1, right? The state is looking at the system and saying, well, we'll do some of the same stuff that the federal government's doing. And so that's a major concern in terms of the direction that state leaders are choosing so far. The governor also doesn't address pending loss of the managed care occupation tax. So this is essentially a tax that produces revenue coming in from the federal government. The state imposes a tax on managed care providers. The federal government reimburses the providers. The state doesn't, so the providers are held harmless. State gets revenue essentially transferred to it from the federal government. That's no longer allowable under H.R. 1. It ends at the end of the year. That's $6 to $8 billion. The state will actually have to figure out how to backfill in lost funds. And there's no plan in the governor's budget for how to deal with that as of yet. There's also a call for some cost shifting at the state level of over $230 million to cover in-home support service costs to counties. I just think the most notable part and reason to raise this is because at a time when counties themselves are dealing with the coming effects of H.R. 1, that cost shifts from the state and other programs aren't going to help them manage the situation any easier. So this proposal comes at an inopportune time in terms of how county budgets are thinking about how they're going to sustain themselves. So that's kind of health, big picture. There's lots of details underneath it, and I'm not going to go into as many of those. But let's talk a little bit about economic security. This is another place where the H.R. 1 affects the loss of food assistance through CalFresh or SNAP will have a major effect, and that's starting already. The governor's budget only makes the required investments in CalFresh, so there's no expansion, no attempt to sort of respond to H.R. 1. In terms of dealing with some of the hunger cliffs. We do have a parallel food assistance program that sits next to CalFresh, just run by the state, called the California Food Assistance Program, much smaller, designed to help immigrants who've been excluded from the state, from CalFresh. That's being called for. The state leaders have agreed to expand that to undocumented seniors for the first time. That's supposed to start being implemented in 2027. The governor does uphold that piece in the state budget, but here again, that's an agreement from prior year's budgets. Otherwise, if you just look across economic security and safety net programs, things just stay the same for the most part, with one exception. So tax credits for low-income families, like the Earned Income Tax Credit, the Young Child Tax Credit, Foster Youth Tax Credit, they're all maintained. CalWORKs grants maintained. SSI and SSP grants maintained. The one exception here is in the child care space, where there has been, in essence, a handshake agreement between the governor and state legislative leaders for a number of years now to increase the number of child care slots in the system to 200,000. We're at about 145,000 now, and the funding to build that out has been delayed now for a couple of years in a row, and the governor proposes to continue to delay it based on budget uncertainties. And so that's the one place where there's a bit of a walk back from where we've been in prior years. Housing and homelessness, just want to note, this is one of those places I'm not even sure I need a slide. There's basically the news here is there's nothing new, right? This is a space where the state has put significant one-time funding into helping local governments and working through state programs for about 5 or 6 years now. But it was always one time, and the governor is letting all of that sunset or not proposing any additional funding. And so we end up with no new funding in affordable housing programs, no additional funding in homelessness programs. So the key place that's of concern in the local government space there is the HAP program, where there have been 6 rounds. I think we're headed for 7. I can't remember the exact number of grants to local governments, cities and counties to deal with combating homelessness. We are on the last $500 million in that, which is about a 50% cut from prior years, and there's no additional HAP funding. So that means the significant work that cities and counties were doing with state assistance has some uncertainty now sitting around that as well. And they're pushing back hard, of course, to see if they can get that some of that funding put back, at least on a one-time basis. In education, I just want to note, when the revenues go up, as the governor is projecting and as the LAO is also projecting, we have constitutional formulas that actually require more of that funding to go to K through 12 education, community colleges, and now because we put pre-K and transitional kindergarten back into Prop 98, they also see increases. So it's not necessarily a policy choice, it's just the dollars go up, the formulas go up, and we see more dollars go in. So there's more than $20 billion more in TK through community colleges in the governor's proposal because the revenue picture is just looking that much brighter. The way to understand what that means policy-wise, it means that there's funding to fully fund the transitional kindergarten build-out. And this year, the governor's proposal has that continue in an effort to try to lower student-to-teacher ratios that were first implemented in this fiscal year. And there's an additional $2 billion in those Prop 98 constitutional dollars for the state preschool program. There's also some additional block grant funding in K through 12 and in community colleges as well. But in your world, this means good news in the universal TK and pre-K arena, here again driven by just the growth in state revenues. And there would be further good news here if state revenues continue to hold up well, but that's to be determined. I do want to say that there is one place state leaders have responded so far in terms of dealing with H.R. 1, and that one place that they have done is they did some early budget actions and put $90 million of one-time general fund into helping prop up Planned Parenthood, given the move out of the Planned Parenthood support at the federal government level. So this is a done deal. Governor and the legislature moved early in February to put some one-time funding in place to help Planned Parenthood. So it is the one place they've done something on the H.R. 1 response so far. I want to talk a little bit just about some impacts at the local level. The State Association of Counties has done their own estimates about what the impacts might be on counties of H.R. 1. They're anticipating annual costs in the $6 to $9.5 billion range. And that's because of having to provide additional indigent health care to folks losing their coverage on Medi-Cal. It's from loss of public health system revenues, and it's from increased work-related costs from having to try to help with keeping people enrolled for Medi-Cal and CalFresh eligibility requirements. And I want to say that last part is not minor. The best way to respond to H.R. 1, given the political landscape that we're facing, is not going to be to near-term undo what it did at the federal level. That looks very unlikely. It's probably not to get the state to do more, given we're not seeing the state trying to do very much right away. It's to actually keep people enrolled and keep the federal dollars flowing. And I will say, having listened to some of the county officials from this county in the last few weeks, there's some really innovative stuff happening around people working to try to make sure that folks are still enrolled and working directly with populations, but that costs money. It's going to take more money in order to do the work, in order to keep folks enrolled, and so that's a cost to the county levels that's not minor. There's no additional funding in a number of areas, plus there's the IHSS shift I talked about, so that's not great. And then I just want to note the Prop 1 dynamic between behavioral health systems and housing, because of the bond that allows local governments to essentially shift funding from behavioral health over to housing, is just also putting pressure on counties where they're having to make choices, where they lose. Those choices result in them losing some support for behavioral health systems in order to have some support for housing. A lot of that maybe is for good reason, but it's still, it's sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and that's just creating some of the sorts of tensions within the county budgeting system. So, just sharing a little perspective here, we think there's no way for the state to deal with all of this unless the state itself starts to have some conversations about some more progressive and equitable revenue solutions, things that produce more money and make the tax code more fair. That can help us address the harms of federal cuts. It can protect the vital services at the local level, and it can make sure we're still investing in Californians. We think there's some low-hanging fruit state leaders ought to be looking at right away. It's not easy for them to deal with scale of revenue in response to something like H.R. 1, but there are some low-hanging fruit, which is we give away a lot of money already through the tax code, through tax breaks, various deductions, credits, and exemptions that go to corporations and high-wealth individuals. On the corporation side, these are sort of tax breaks that they can use that reduce their tax bills. And many of them are well-intended, like let's try to stimulate research and development or encourage certain kinds of behavior. A lot of them are very inefficiently applied, and the state is essentially losing money for behavior it's not seeing in the economy. And so some of those could be reevaluated. One of the key things we're worried about is that essentially a large share of corporations in the state are able to use these tax breaks to reduce their tax bills to the $800 minimum. The $800 minimum is essentially like a license fee you pay to just have a business in the state of California, and you have to pay it one way or another. Tax breaks can't zero it out. But 45%, for the latest year we have data in 2023, 45% of corporations in the state of California reduce their tax bill to $800 a year just using these tax breaks. It's a huge cost to the state of California. We're talking the state's largest and most profitable corporations. I could show you a list. It's too hard to put up on a slide. But it's an example of an inefficiency within how the state's spending its money through the tax code that the state could do something about and would put some money back into the system that we could start using to undo some of the harm of H.R. 1. Some of the key places to go to first are, we're calling this tax haven abuse because it's super wonky and technical, but there's a tax break in the state tax code called the Water's Edge election, which allows corporations to essentially house profits overseas outside of taxation by the state or by the U.S. government. It's not encouraging any kind of good economic behavior that helps the state. It's just a tax break. Makes very little sense. It's been on the books for years. Costs the state $3 to $4 billion a year. It makes imminent sense to just completely eliminate it. That's a low-hanging fruit kind of place to go for some early funding. There's some other places like adjusting tax rates for other sorts of, or adjusting other sorts of deductions, like the research and development tax credit is a good tax credit in terms of what it's trying to encourage, but it's actually largely used by the largest corporations to just bank future tax credits in case they have future tax bills. So that's not a great way to be using a credit, and it's not incentivizing R&D. So we could scale that one back, make sure it's targeted to folks who might actually use it correctly, would save the state a couple $2 billion. And the other thing we should start doing in this is this is more of a like not this year but future years thing, is we should be thinking about the question of why we don't have a progressive corporation tax structure. In the income tax base, we have a very clear value statement that we've put in for years and years that says if you earn a lot more, you should pay a lot more. In the corporation side, they pay the exact same rate as somebody who runs a small business, small bookstore, or small hardware store or something. And they actually get more tax breaks to avoid taxation overall. That's not a good way to run the tax system. Why aren't we asking the most profitable corporations in the state to pay a higher rate? And we could probably do that and actually reduce tax rates on small businesses in a way that would actually stimulate economic development, and we'd still produce additional revenue for the state government. So there are things that the state should do that are not things they have to do by ballot measure, that could be done through legislative work and through budget work. And we think there's a responsibility by state leaders to start doing that, particularly when it's those same corporations that we're talking about that benefited the most from the 2017 Trump tax cuts and from the H.R. 1 tax cuts that were enacted this past year. So I'll just stop by saying a couple things about what comes next. This is probably all really well known by all of you, but like we're working through budget subcommittee work right now. The governor gets the second bite of the apple in May. We'll know a lot more about what the revenue picture looks like, and the governor will release a lot more detailed version of the budget. Could look very different than what the January version looks like, just to be clear. The legislature then has just a couple of weeks to work through the process of deliberating on that, and by June 15th, we'll all enact a budget at the state level and have a budget deal. The governor will then sign in some form by July 1st. So a lot's going to happen very quickly in the next couple of months, and the chance for advocacy is to like make sure your voice is heard. I think I would say particularly between now and May. As Supervisor Mitchell knows, like after May 14th, it goes behind doors in a lot of ways because it's just a lot has to happen very quickly. A couple of quick advertisements. If you want to see a lot more detail than I've been able to share about this, we have this in a first look analysis of the governor's budget. It's not so first look anymore, but it was first look in January when we put it out. We have an annual conference on April 22nd where about 500 folks come together and talk about this across advocacy, policymakers, community organizers. You are all very welcome. Supervisor Mitchell spoke last year in honor of our 30th anniversary. So that was great. Please join us on April 22nd. If you don't do budget advocacy now and you're here in the audience or a member of the public and you want to, we have a budget academy on our website that actually has like glossaries of terms, how you do this work, who to contact. And so we can help you do this work. It's another part of the mission of why we're here. We're actually adding a tax academy sort of element to that so people understand tax policies. So please look us up and ask us for help and we'll do what we can. So thank you. I'll stop there. I'm sorry to have droned on for so long. Like I said, I wish I was here with better news, but I also hope it's serving as a call to action about the work we all have to do to try to change the landscape that I just described. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. And Chair Mitchell, we have time. We'd love to hear reflections and questions from our board, and also just thinking about like the work that you're doing and the spaces that you are in. We definitely are paying attention to May Revise. We are preparing for First 5 LA's annual summit, and it will take place on April 24th. And so we are preparing for that. So really wanting to hear your reflections, questions, things that you want to track to make sure that we are incorporating the work into our upcoming advocacy and policy efforts.
Remind us, when is our scheduled trip to Sacramento? Do we have a date yet?
We do not have a date yet,
Okay.
so we need to coordinate with schedules.
You don't have it, okay.
Yes.
I would encourage as many commissioners who can go to please go, based on some of those slides we saw. I saw a lot of raised brows, so this will be our opportunity as First 5 to go and express our concern. Chris, are you hearing at least an intention to address H.R. 1 in the May Revise? I mean, I appreciate timing. The budget's released in January. It's probably put to bed in December. H.R. 1 hit us all over the head. So are you hearing that there's an intention to focus on it?
I wish I could say that the answer to that is yes. I think, unfortunately, but the answer based on my read of what I see coming from the administration is no. I think they're playing wait and see. I think there are folks in the legislature who have an intention. I don't know if they're the majority. I don't know where leadership is firmly on this and how much and to what scale they're going to push back. And I think my concern is the design of H.R. 1 very much allows state leaders to kind of slow walk their response because so much of HR 1 is implemented after January 1st, 2027 by
Right.
design in order to
Right.
get past the November midterms.
Right.
So that when we start implementing work requirements and 300,000 people lose their health care in one
Right.
fell swoop.
It'll be after
that
the
that will be
election.
after the midterms.
Yeah. Elections
But,
have
but I think
consequences.
the inexcusable part about that response is we know that's coming.
Yes.
Like it's, the bill is passed, we know what the numbers look like, so why aren't we in it, working on a state budget this year that says this is
Right.
exactly how the state's going to respond?
Right.
So, yeah.
I would agree. Prop 98, which is something I've given up years ago to really try to fundamentally understand, because there's probably only about 3 people in the whole state, and you're one of them, who really understand Prop 98. And I recall that that kinder, but now universal pre-K and K,
Yeah.
it's gone in and out, in and out. And I know that that's sometimes manipulated by the K through 12 world. So universal pre-K and K is now back in Prop 98, in terms of them setting the floor. Does that then proportionately benefit pre-K and K programs?
It is now, and it will be for the next 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Or for 4 or 5
Okay,
years.
then that's good.
And I think there are a couple reasons for that. One is, well, one of them could be that if we stay on a revenue growth trajectory, and who knows, right? But if the revenue is growing, being in Prop 98 helps. If the revenue starts to decline and the formulas drive the spending down, it's maybe not so great, you know? It maybe still is better in being in that part of the budget than in everything else. So it's
Absolutely.
not like it's necessarily worse.
Right.
But the other reason is that for the last 2 fiscal years, the state has faced a budget deficit that's more sizable than the one that that the governor was projecting for this year. And one of the ways the state leaders resolved the deficit was to kick the can down the road a bit. And one of the things that they did is rather than meet some of the minimum funding requirements for TK through community colleges, is that they basically said, well, we're not going to give that to you in this fiscal year. We're going to spread it out and give it to you over the next 4, 5, 6 years. And so one of the things that you're going to see is that this is why, like, folks in the non-Prop 98 side of the budget are not feeling super great about the fact that the revenues are going up. It's because a larger percentage of any revenue growth is actually going to be going to paying past due bills to TK through community colleges. So if you're in TK through community college, it means you're
You're
in better
good. Right.
shape. If you're in the safety net and health,
Or the child care, the 44,000 slots of child care.
or
that
climate
we're gonna
change,
lose.
or,
Right.
right, then you're on the side that's discretionarily available, or higher ed, outside of community colleges, then you're in the space that,
Right.
if cuts have to happen, you're in that space.
Well, when you consider our constituency, which are 0 to 5, universal pre-K and K, great on the Prop 98 side,
Yeah.
but our 0 to 4, 0 to 3.5, whatever pre-K starts, they take that loss on the child care side.
That's right.
So it's
Yeah.
giveth and taketh away at the same time. Last question for me. You talked about the tax credits, and that can be, controversial. Some are considered, economy stimulating. Film tax credit would be one of those from my perspective. For years, they've always talked about revisiting the comprehensive list of tax credits to figure out what's really working and what's not.
Right, yeah.
Is that happening? Because we know the governor expanded the film tax credit.
Right.
We're trying to keep that industry in California. Are they looking at the overall list?
They're not, although there is the revival. There was an effort a few years ago to try to put some statutory language in place that would actually require an assessment of all of the state's tax credits, deductions, and exemptions, and evaluate whether they were succeeding or not. Stronger versions of that legislation would have actually required them to sunset and then be reauthorized. Those never went very far. Weaker versions that just called for an analysis to be shared with the legislature kind of went a little ways and then lost momentum. Those efforts are actually being revived right now as a way to at least get some information on the table about whether some of these things work. or don't work. So, we're hopeful that maybe that will build some momentum. If you look across the entire, I told you that the general fund is a $250 billion general fund. If you look at all tax credits, exemptions, and deductions the state gives away, it's about $80 billion. So that's spending through the tax code. It's foregone revenue. About $3 billion of that is the stuff that goes for low-income families with children. The earned income tax credit, the young child tax credit, the foster youth tax credit. The rest of it is $7 or $8 billion, maybe a little higher for stuff that goes for corporations. And then the rest of it, honestly, is the stuff that goes to middle and higher income households, like the mortgage interest deduction, the charitable giving deduction, and a whole variety of the kind of things that people who itemize their taxes, myself included, take advantage of. And I think there's real questions to be raised at the state level about how much of that makes sense when folks don't have health care and access to food assistance and child care. So we need a different kind of conversation about taxes in this state.
Dr. Ferrer, followed by Commissioner Blakely. Dr. Ferrer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated the depth of information, also the focus on raising revenues. I think one thing that often gets lost in this conversation, particularly about losing money like through HR 1, is it's not just that services go away for people who need services. It's super disruptive to the economy. If you think about millions of people losing CalFresh, you think about all the stores,
Yeah.
particularly in some of our communities that have less resources, where most of the shopping that's getting done is getting done using CalFresh. So you have a huge economic impact at stores. The healthcare system can really literally collapse in some communities, not just because people don't get services, but if there's not people enrolled in Medi-Cal, then providers who provide services to those people will have to make cuts. Every time we lose a federal grant, it not only affects the services that we're providing, for example, we close public health clinics, but it also means that people lose their jobs and can't really contribute in the same way to the economy because they now have no wages. So I think we need to highlight that part of the story, that it's not just, because sometimes people don't care that much about vulnerable people, to be honest, and they're not really that concerned, and it's not compelling. But it's super disruptive to the economy, which means it's disruptive to everyone across the board. And I think we have to constantly remind ourselves that when you don't make these investments, it has a really detrimental impact overall on our economy and our economic well-being, which is why it's surprising to see the governor step back so far from filling the gaps. Because if the healthcare system is decimated, this is a state and a county that has millions of people employed by the healthcare system. So it's going to have a huge impact on economic vitality.
Yeah.
That trickle-down economics 2026 version.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think we all come at it, we're so upset about the loss of services, but there's a whole nother side to losing this level of service. These are not small, insignificant cuts that can be absorbed in any one sector at all. So I think it's very short-sighted of the state not to have a plan to step in because of the economic devastation.
Dr. Ferrer has spoken, state legislature. Chris, any comment? Commissioner Blakely.
Thank you. One, I just want to thank you, Chris, for this presentation. At Crystal Stairs, we partner with the Budget and Policy Center each year during the May Revise to educate our Community Voices members. So we're so grateful for that, and we'll be in Sacramento. Oh, yes. Can you hear me? Hello? All right, there we go. I got to speak to this. Just saying again that we appreciate it because we do ensure that the tools that the Budget and Policy Center have, that we're not only just aware of it as folks who need to watch this for the sake of our job and knowing what we're doing, but we want to make sure our community is well informed. So just want to thank you. Just to comment on your presentation, because I've seen this presentation a couple times and really dialed into this work. From our vantage point, it is deeply concerning what is happening right now in terms of the state response to what's happening. I want to kind of paint a picture for us here in the room that, with the impact of what is going to happen from H.R. 1, as we've all said, is not just going to be a short-term impact. The impact of this will be felt for decades because of the decimation of programs and critical services, not only just for all Californians, but for those who are most vulnerable. And it is deeply concerning of where our reality may be just in the next 3 years, in the next year, right? And so just to add on to even what Dr. Ferrer said, I appreciate the economic impact because we've been also studying that as an organization that serves nearly 60,000 families annually. And, and Supervisor Mitchell may be familiar with some of this data I'm about to say, because we had talked about, as we know, there was this whole, I won't even repeat the word, but there was some alleging of things happening in various states. And there was this injunction now, thankfully, to pause it. But, in terms of $5 billion being frozen in California, we looked at the numbers for our contracts, the trickle-down economics, and we saw that if that were to go through and have a, just like that, we would see immediately 30,000 families we can't serve, 15,000 parents that cannot go to work, not nearly 10,000 child care providers that would not be able to get the funding through the reimbursement rate. And then in addition to that, to the economic impact, we look at an agency like ours that in our local economy, we add over $800 million to the economy. And so it's to say that when we're looking at how we're going to grapple with the healthcare issues, with the food access, we must not take from those who, the funding, of child care, because then the full safety net completely collapses. And from conversations I've been having in Sacramento as well, it seems like there's a whole lot of education we need to do with legislators and decision makers about that, because there is some real, not only talking about the need that's still out there, we have wait lists of thousands of families across the just county alone. I'm not even thinking about the state right now, but just LA County, there are several thousands of families still needing care right now. And to know that we're in a space where we're not only going to be able to get to those families, there's threats to the current families we serve today, and it's extremely alarming. And so, we are also beating that same drum of how do we look at the state to explore these other economic or these other revenue sources, because, at this current rate, we just are very, again, concerned and really wonder how, we know there's going to be an impact, but how large is the impact?
Appreciate you, Commissioner. Commissioner McBride, and I'm going to just take one more question because remember, I'm driving the time train.
Okay, I'll try to keep it
Commissioner
brief.
McBride.
Thank you for this presentation. So much sad information. There are some bright spots. I have been more and more trying to figure out, what can we do? We get an abundance of the reality. And so I'm going to ask a question based on your expertise, and maybe it's more theoretical, but I know that there's an effort being made right now by a lot of unions throughout the state to get Prop 55 extended past 2030, because that would be detrimental if it doesn't get extended past 2030. But that's kind of a lot of time between now and 2030, and because we know that there hasn't in the past been an appetite for lack of understanding, for a lot of corporate dollars being pushed into making sure that corporations are not held accountable for their taxes. Like the split roll, there was a lot of misinformation about it affecting Prop 13 in people's personal homes. what is your feeling now? Do you think that the effort to get 55 extended past 2030 is the best use of our advocacy time and energy? Or is there an appetite now, finally, with everything that's surfaced that we see happening and more people being impacted by the decisions that are being made and affecting our state and our inability to maintain these structures? Is there an appetite now to maybe use some of that energy to push in the next couple years for more of a progressive corporate tax?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is I think there's energy for both, but I think we need to understand that there's not an either or to it. And I think part of the challenge of tax policy in California is it happens via the ballot measure because it's so hard to get the 2/3 majority needed at the state legislature. So a 50% plus one threshold at the ballot is where we tend to do tax policy. And that means we do it very episodically in individual years and individual campaigns, which makes it hard to have a multi-year agenda about what's needed. But if you were to create a multi-year agenda to address HR 1 at a baseline, yes, you would need to start by extending and making permanent the personal income tax increases at the top of the income spectrum that were enacted by Prop 30 in 2012 and then renewed in 2016, but expire in 2030. Like, you'd want to know that you're not going to take money out of the system, right? And that's like,
Keep that secure.
yeah, but that's baseline, right? What you're trying to do is just keep the baseline solid at that point. And then you would say, well, what are we going to do that produces $5, $10, $15 billion a year in addition to that via making the tax system more fair in other ways, in the corporation tax, via some other policies. And so coming back to commercial property tax reform at the local level, there has to be a sort of thought process of sequencing them, but we have to start in a place where the conversation's just different, right? Because right now we've got state leaders who are only having a conversation about spending and reserves and not having a conversation about the third tool in the toolbox. And I think that's on all of us to make sure they know we want them to have that conversation.
So do both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions from commissioners? Seeing none, let's open it up for public comment on agenda item 7.
Confirming there are no public comments on agenda item 7.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation always. Oh, yes.
Mitchell, sorry, last thing, just because I know the policy team is going to say, Aurea, you forgot to mention. The policy team, there are members who will be in Sacramento next week doing policy advocacy with the other First Fives through the First Five Association. And we also have colleagues that will be attending the Policy Insights conference or summit for the California Budget and Policy Center, and we will be sending you an invitation to our summit. So wanted to close and offer that.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Chris, again for coming. Going to move on to agenda item number 8, a portrait of LA County 2026. Adia, I know that there are a group of presenters, and I'm going to leave it to you to help bring them forward. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to present on this next item. We want to share an update on our partnership with Measure of America and the community engagement effort that supported the development of a portrait of Los Angeles County 2026. We are pleased to have guest presenters. They are researchers with Measure of America. Kristen Lewis, the director and co-founder of Measure of America, and Alex Powers, associate director. We also have in the audience Bill Pitkin, special advisor on this work. Our presenters will provide an overview of the findings from a portrait of Los Angeles County 2026 as a detailed portrait of well-being and access to opportunity in LA County. Over the past year, we partnered with Measure of America to design a series of data walks and engagement strategy to elevate local voices and validate early findings of the portrait of LA County. These data walks engage more than 235 community members across 5 Best Start communities: the Antelope Valley, Arleta, Pacoima, East LA, South Los Angeles, and Central Long Beach. In keeping with our commitment to elevating families' lived experiences and policy discussions, our data walk centered the voices of parents, caregivers, and community members. Their insights directly informed and are reflected in the important countywide report on well-being, equity, and opportunity. You can see more detail in the report that was shared with you, and their reflections are also included on the portal. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kristen, and they will do the presentation, and then there will be time for questions. So thank you, Kristen.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to start out, of course, by thanking First Five, by thanking.
It should be green and just move it closer to you.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Much
Perfect.
better.
So I just wanted to start out by thanking you all for having us here today, and thank First Five, and especially for their support of the data walks. So Measure of America is a project of the Social Science Research Council. We provide reports and tools that focus on well-being and access to opportunity in the United States. The hallmark of our work is the Human Development Approach and the Human Development Index. So the approach puts people at the center of analysis. Instead of asking, how is the economy doing, like traditional measures like GDP, it asks, how are people doing? It's formally defined as the process of improving people's well-being and expanding their choices and opportunities. It debuted in 1990 at the United Nations and is now the global gold standard for measuring well-being. It's rooted in Nobel laureate Amartya Sen's capabilities framework. So capabilities are our toolkit for living a freely chosen, flourishing lives. Capabilities are expanded by or constrained by the things we do ourselves, but also by the conditions and institutions around us. So many capabilities are needed to live a freely chosen, flourishing life: political participation, voice and agency, a clean environment, family and community, and more. But it would be impossible to measure all of those aspects of the human experience in a single index. So the Human Development Approach brings together just 3 core capabilities: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. These are basic building blocks of a good life. Thank you. So we adapted the HDI to make it more relevant to the United States rather than the international context for which it was developed, but we kept these same 3 areas: a long and healthy life, access to knowledge, and a decent standard of living. But we use slightly different indicators. So for a long and healthy life, we use life expectancy at birth. So we calculate that ourselves using mortality data obtained by special agreement from the California Department of Health. And it's 5 years worth of data, 2019 to 2023. It's a roll-up. So you'll note that some of our figures will be different than, say, the County Department of Public Health, which is using single-year estimates for life expectancy. So that's the reason for any discrepancy you notice there. Access to knowledge, we use educational degree attainment for the whole population, 3 to 24. So we get in those critically important early childhood education years. educational attainment for all adults 25 and up. And then for a decent standard of living, the proxy we use is median personal earnings. So those are the wages and salaries of all workers ages 16 and above, full and part-time. So we put all of these numbers together, we put them all on the same scale, we add them together, we divide by 3, and we get the Human Development Index that falls on a scale from 0 to 10. So that's what I'm going to be talking about mostly today, are these Human Development Index scores. So this is not the first portrait of Los Angeles County we've done. We did this one that looks quite similar to the one we just did in 2017. And I'll just share with you a few ways that it was used. Dozens of organizations used it for planning, programming, and policy making. 3 examples. First, the County Department of Mental Health used it for needs assessment and planning, and they actually reached out to us in 2023 asking where is the next portrait of LA County, and offering to support the production of this updated volume. Second, it served as the model for RD's State of Black LA report series. And third, the City of Los Angeles reallocated their workforce development sites based on need using the neighborhood HDI scores as a guide. So those are just sort of 3 examples. So in terms of this new report, what are we trying to do? So the analysis explores well-being and access to opportunity among Angelenos through an equity lens. It provides a snapshot of today and an assessment of progress since the last report in 2017. It identifies which groups and places are experiencing higher levels of well-being than before, which ones are just treading water, and which ones are falling behind. It also presents relevant county and state data alongside federal data on a range of issues related to well-being, including mental health, homelessness, youth well-being, and youth disconnection. And most importantly, it incorporates the voices and views of Angelenos themselves through a new project component, the community data walks that you've just heard about. So these data walks were in-person and online convenings of Angelenos in which we presented preliminary report findings on these big posters, and then participants were invited to discuss their reactions to the data, their thoughts on why things are as they are, their recommendations about what needs to change, and their visions for a better future. So we had interpretation for these events, childcare, various things like that. And we held the walks in partnership, of course, with First Five's Best Start programs in 5 communities across LA. We also held virtual gatherings for other countywide groups. So we worked with the LA Opportunity Youth Collaborative to hold a data walk for their young leaders, with the LGBT Center to meet with LGBTQ Angelenos, and with Department of Mental Health to interact with their community planning team. So the results surfaced really important issues, informed our final recommendations, and brought the real voices of community members to the report. So the first picture here is Long Beach. The second is the Antelope Valley. Unfortunately, the timing of our data walks last summer coincided with the uptick in ICE raids. So unfortunately for these reasons, some of our Best Start partners were understandably and with good reason anxious to gather in person. So they were forced to move all of their programming, including our data walks, online, and we so appreciate their flexibility. We still had a wonderful experience with the data walks and involved many, many people. So these 6 issues came up again and again in the data walks, and I'm just going to read you a quote from one person. One issue is the price of rent going up, and wages aren't. I think everybody's kind of dealing with that. Even in my community, a lot of people are having to move because they can't afford to stay where they've been staying for years. So yeah, that's one thing I noticed. So you can just see how hearing someone's actual voice really makes the topic feel much more real. So what we did is created an online portal where you can hear over 200 conversational snippets like this. You can hear real people's voices. Basically 10 key themes line the bottom of the screen. You can click on over 200 conversations, hear people's thoughts and ideas in their own words. So the portal is not great on the phone. It really likes to spread out and needs lots of room, so it's better to look at it on a full screen on a laptop. So let me just say a little bit about how the data in this report relate to your objectives, to First Five objectives. So our data on infant mortality relate to First Five's child mortality goal. The data on poverty, on child poverty and recommendations related to priority neighborhoods for investment relate to First Five's child poverty goal. The report's data on housing, cost burden, and recommendations on affordable housing relate to First Five's housing insecurity goal. Our recommendations on improving access to mental health treatment related to First Five's maternal depression goal. Our data on food deserts and pollution relate to First Five's healthy food and access to parks and open space goal. This section in the report on early care and education relates to your early care and education goals, and the recommendation to invest in high-quality early childhood care and education relates to your early intervention services goal. And last but not least, our recommendation to support threatened communities relates to First Five's goal around culturally affirming services and supports. Okay, so that's a lot of introduction. Now I will finally tell you a little bit about the report. So just to remind you what we're talking about, the index combines health, education, and earnings indicators all in one. So the good thing about this kind of index that has a limited number of indicators is that we can create scores for lots of different population groups. So each dot represents about 10,000 Angelenos. So we present scores for the county as a whole, and then also for women and men. There it's going, good. I just love that it's working. We also present them for 7 racial and ethnic groups, and the size of the massive dots represents the population size, basically. And we present scores for women and men within those racial and ethnic groups. We also present scores for immigrant Angelenos and U.S.-born Angelenos. And then we do a cross between race and ethnicity and immigrants versus U.S. Citizens, and so have scores, for instance, for foreign-born Black residents and U.S.-born Black residents, or foreign-born Latino residents and U.S.-born Latino residents. And then last but not least, we do have scores for subgroups. So for Asian subgroups, we have a dozen different Asian subgroups we have scores for, and we have scores for 5 different Latino subgroups. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So this is a really cool feature of the HDI, allowing scores for these small demographic groups, as well as for places, using a consistent measure over time. So we're also able to compare how things were in 2017, in the 2017 report, with how they are now. So as I show you these slides, we're going to see some very disheartening disparities in well-being and the kind of choices and opportunities different groups of Angelenos have. One thing I hope you'll keep in mind is that there's nothing natural or inevitable about the kind of inequality that we see in LA County. The kind of landscape of inequality we see today is the result of deliberate policy choices and investments that favored some and excluded others over decades. But different policy choices can create a different, better, fairer future, one in which all Angelenos can not just survive, but thrive. So keep that in mind when you look at my more sad slides, my more depressing slides. Okay, so what you see
Can
here.
I just get a clarifying question?
Sure.
Just as you're going through. I want to make sure I'm understanding this. The HDI is just looking at 5 measures.
Yeah.
5 metrics.
Yes.
Because you talked about, you looked at other things.
We look at so many other things.
Right.
And the report has tons of other things, but the
Exactly.
index
But
itself is just this.
Is just those,
Yeah.
those 5 metrics.
Yeah.
And then the time, I'm a little confused about the time period, because I thought I heard you say it was 5 years, but then I heard you say you started at 2015.
Yes.
So,
Okay. So 2 things then. So our Our access to knowledge and earnings indicators come from the American Community Survey. In the last report, it was the American Community Survey 2015. And this year, it's the American Community Survey 2023 for those indicators. In terms of our life expectancy calculations, this time around, we used 2019 to 2023. The last time around, it was 2010 to 2014.
Okay, and how did you adjust for COVID? and life
So
expectancy?
we didn't adjust for it. It's reflected.
It's reflected.
It's
Okay.
reflected. So that's why some of our life expectancy estimates, since it's the 5-year roll-up, are going to
Right.
look a bit lower than your life expectancy estimates. Yeah? Okay.
And just to add, we do have, from the Department of Public Health, single-year life expectancy data that your team provided on page 87. So that's part of the picture.
Yeah. They were super helpful, your staff. Okay, so here you see people on a number line with each person representing a group. So those on the right side have higher scores, those on the left side have lower scores. LA County as a whole scores 5.64 on the 10-point scale. That number is useful as an anchor for understanding the scores of different groups of Angelenos, which ones are scoring above the average, which ones are scoring below the average, and by how much. Women have a slightly higher HDI than men, 5.91 versus 5.40. That's because women have better educational and health outcomes, though men continue to earn more. Asian Angelenos have the highest score, 7.68, and Nahopi Angelenos the lowest at 4.01, followed by Latino Angelenos at 4.45. Nahopi is Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander. When we add gender to race and ethnicity, we see that Nahopi men have the lowest HDI of all, driven by very low life expectancy and low school enrollment rates among these groups. And Asian women have the highest HDI, driven primarily by the highest life expectancy, 88.6 years. One benefit, as I mentioned, of the HDI is that it allows for tracking change over time. So compared to our last report, which used 2015 data, we don't see a big change. It was 5.43 then and 5.64 now. This increase fell far short of the goal set in the last report, which was a 1-point change. And the main reason for this anemic progress is COVID and the disproportionate impacts it had on different groups of Angelenos. So over time, women gained more ground than men. White and Asian Angelenos made more progress than Black and Latino Angelenos. And Nahopi and foreign-born Angelenos actually lost ground in terms of well-being since 2015. Okay, so here you see, of course, a map of LA. In all our maps, the darker colors represent more of something. So here, the darker colors represent higher HDI scores. And we see here 140 different places, cities and unincorporated areas in the county, and the community plan areas within the city of LA. So the highest is Brentwood Pacific Palisades with a score of 9.58. And the lowest scoring area is Southeast Los Angeles with a score of 3.03. And these data, just to remind you, predate the fires. This is, showing us that even a very high score doesn't protect you from all of life's misfortunes. Of course, these were areas really impacted by the fires. Residents of Brentwood Pacific Palisades can expect to live on average 88 years. In Southeast Los Angeles, people live on average 77.7 years, a 10-year life expectancy gap. About half the adults in Southeast Los Angeles have less than a high school degree, compared with just 1% of adults in Brentwood. And the typical worker in Brentwood and Pacific Palisades earns over $100,000, $74,500 more than the typical worker in Southeast LA, who earns about $29,000. So you'll, of course, see a relationship between the well-being scores by race and ethnicity and the well-being scores by place. This relationship is a product of residential segregation by race and ethnicity as well as by income, and we discuss that throughout the report. In terms of change over time, yellow represents increased scores and pink represents decreased scores, and the darker the color, the more the increase either way. 6 places in the county saw their HDI scores increase by more than 1 point. So those areas were Agora Hills, Signal Hill, Palms, Mar Vista, and Delray, Culver City, Downtown, and Northeast Los Angeles. So what does 1 point mean? It basically could translate into, say, 2.5 years worth of life. A 10 percentage point increase in the share of adults with at least a college degree, or about $7,000 in salary per year. I do want to note that Southeast Los Angeles, it didn't increase by a point, but nonetheless, and it still does have the lowest HDI score, but it made notable headway from 2.26 was their score in the last report. 4 communities in Los Angeles County had human development scores decrease by more than half a point, so Castaic, San Marino, View Park, Windsor Hills, and Gardena. So I've talked about scores by different demographic groups as well as by place. It would be really nice to have scores also by age group, but because of the indicators that we have, we can't do that. If you have a degree attainment for all adults 25 and up, we don't have that for children, right? So what we did is we included a child well-being table, child well-being scorecard in the report, and also, children grow up in families and communities, and their well-being depends almost entirely on the resources, capabilities, and choices the adults around them make. So arguably, HDI is a sound proxy for how different groups of children are faring. Nonetheless, we're always thinking about ways to better measure well-being of children. And then just to note that we do have all of the scores of all the places arranged by supervisorial district for each thing. Yes. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so now we've been talking about the whole index, and now I'm going to talk about each of the components. So a long and healthy life is the first one. So this is measured again by life expectancy at birth. That's how long a baby born today can expect to live if the prevailing mortality patterns continue throughout that baby's lifetime. So here we go. So women live about 6 years longer than men on average, 83.6 years versus 77.5 years. So women do have a biological advantage that accounts for some of this difference, but not all of it. So men are much more likely than women to die from deaths of despair and from unintentional injuries like car crashes, workplace injuries, and drug overdose. They're also less likely to seek medical care. Nahopi men have the lowest life expectancy, 65.9 years, followed by black men, 69.1 years. Asian women, as I mentioned earlier, have the highest life expectancy, 88.6 years. In terms of change over time, Latino and black residents saw the sharpest life expectancy declines. Just to remind you, something of course all of you know, these racial and ethnic gaps stem from sharp and mostly preventable differences in the circumstances of people's daily lives. Neighborhood conditions, the availability of healthy foods, access to behavioral health care, exposure to chronic stress, and more. We did disaggregate by Asian subgroup, and we found quite a big difference. So Vietnamese Angelenos can expect to live 89.6 years, astonishingly long. Cambodian Angelenos to 79.4 years, so a decade of difference. This speaks to the importance of disaggregating to the degree possible. Also note that we had separate scores for Nahopi residents and for Asian residents. Sometimes these two groups are put together, which makes a lot of sense sometimes for political reasons, but it would really mask the health challenges that Nahopi Angelenos face were we to have done that. Okay, so here we have the same map by life expectancy. The highest life expectancy is found in Westwood, 88.1 years. The lowest in Sun Village, 71.8 years. Sun Village was also a low-scoring place in the last report. Okay, now I'm on to access to knowledge. So again, the education index is the school enrollment for everyone ages 3 to 24, plus degree attainment for adults 25 and up. White residents have the highest education index, driven by high rates of degree attainment and school enrollment. Latino residents have the lowest education score, driven by lower rates of degree attainment. So here you see education scores by Latino subgroup. And you can see one thing that really affects the score for Latinos is the large share of foreign-born Latino adults who did not graduate high school, about half of all foreign-born Latino adults in LA. But we see that for U.S.-born Latino adults, only 12.9% did not graduate high school. So that's lower than the rate for LA County as a whole. So the educational attainment among foreign-born Latino adults is really a product of the limited access they had to education in their home countries before they came here. Whereas U.S.-born Latino adults are kind of on par with the rest of the city of LA in many important indicators, including school enrollment. So now we have education index by place. And we see the top is Westwood, no surprise there, right? Because that's where UCLA is. So the population has lots of students, lots of graduate students and professors. And the lowest score is found in Maywood, less than 2, 1.67. So this is one of the lowest education index scores we've seen, and it's really the large share of adults who don't have a high school degree is really affecting that. Now we have a decent standard of living, the third sort of pillar of the index. And just a reminder, these are median personal earnings. So it's the wages and salaries of all adults 16 and above. So these figures might look low to you. You might be used to seeing household figures, which are much higher. You might be used to seeing averages. But the median is basically like if you took all the workers in LA and put them in a line, the person in the very middle, their wages, that's the median wage. So in LA, that's $44,600. And what really jumps out at to me at this figure is that white men kind of are practically falling off the slide there. They're so far to the right compared to everyone else. And Latina women are at the other extreme. So Latina women have the lowest median earnings, $31,800, and white men the highest, $80,000, $300. So the gap between white men and Latina women is $48,500. That's bigger than the median personal earnings for the county as a whole. And men earn about $9,000 more than women in the county overall, and it differs by race and ethnicity. But this gap actually grew since our last report when it was $7,500, so that was a disheartening finding. Of course, we can close this gender pay gap by supporting girls and women to study subjects that lead to higher paying jobs, by addressing occupational segregation that concentrates women, especially women of color, in lower paying sectors, by enacting and enforcing laws around wage discrimination, by changing norms around who takes the second shift, and by making high quality childcare more accessible and affordable to everyone. So here again, we see the map of LA, and we see the top and bottom in terms of earnings. In Palos Verdes Estates, it's $120,000. In Cudahy, $28,300. So again, keep in mind that these are medians. So half of the residents of Palos Verdes Estates are earning more than $120,000, and half of the residents of Cudahy are earning less than $28,300. So it's a very big difference. So those are the three components of the index. We also always calculate the rate of youth disconnection because this is the share of young people 16 to 24 who are neither working nor in school. It's not part of the index, but it's a really important indicator when you think about human development, because this period of emerging adulthood is really when you lay the groundwork for a flourishing, freely chosen adulthood. So it's a very important indicator of well-being. In terms of neighborhood cluster, in terms of place, Lancaster has the highest, about more than 20%, so that's 1 in 5 young people, neither working nor in school. West LA, Century City, and Palms, it's just 3.4%, so that's a 6-fold difference between these two parts of the region. And so in terms of demographic groups, sorry, there's a lot of things on this next slide. Basically what we see is that young men have slightly higher rates than young women. Black Angelenos have higher rates than Angelenos of other racial and ethnic groups. About 1 in 5 is out of school and out of work. Young people who are growing up in poverty, again, 1 in 5 are out of school and out of work. Young mothers, this is a very striking one. So women 16 to 24 who have a child, about 1 in 3 are neither working nor in school. Young people with a disability, 1 in 4, are neither working nor in school. Young people who have less than a high school diploma, it's again more than 1 in 3. And then young people who have never worked or who have last worked over 5 years ago, nearly half of them are out of school and out of work. So that's a very hard to reconnect population that should get much more sort of priority attention. So those are our findings. I realize it's a lot of data. You probably felt like you were drinking from a numbers fire hose, but I assure you it's just like a little shot glass full of the data that we have in the report. Tons of numbers in there, lots more things I would love to tell you, but obviously we don't have the time. So before I close, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the agenda for action. So we had 2 advisory panels. One was made up of county representatives from different departments and offices of LA County, the other of civil society leaders, and together they hashed out a bunch of priorities in terms of improving the scores for everyone and closing gaps between different racial and ethnic groups, between women and men, and between neighborhoods. So the 3 cross-cutting imperatives that emerged were addressing disparity among Angelenos and prioritizing places where the well-being of children and families is at risk. And those were really using the index score as a way to identify those groups. And also implementing prevention programs. Just it's much more humane, much more cost-effective, much more efficient to address problems before they become an intractable issue, before they become extremely difficult, extremely painful for people, extremely costly for us as a society. So prioritizing prevention was really an important thing that came out. And then they made 9 recommendations. 2 were in health, so addressing premature mortality, particularly among Black and Nahopi Angelenos and among men, and improving access to behavioral health services. 2 were in education, investing in early childhood education, and helping young people lay the groundwork for flourishing adulthoods. 2 were in standard of living, expanding economic security to those who earn the least and too often have too little job security, particularly Latino Angelenos and women. And keeping people housed was another part of that one. And then 3 were more multi-sectoral, supporting threatened communities, including the 1 in every 3 Angelenos who is an immigrant, LGBTQ residents, and unhoused Angelenos. That was one other recommendation. Decreasing justice involvement was another, and disaster recovery and prevention was a third. So before closing, I'll just say that it was really a dream come true to work on this project that we started, in a sense, over about a decade ago, and really the privilege of a lifetime to work with so many people, including the partners and the Best Start sites, who were really wonderful, incredibly generous with their time. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner.
I have one question. One of the first objectives is to, increase the number of children with developmental delays receiving early intervention services. And in the data, you talk about early care and education. Were you able to break out children who have received individual family service plans or other kinds of special education services?
We were not. We were not. We would love to do that if we had access to the data to do it. A future project, I hope.
Future project, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Tilton.
This is outstanding. It is just incredible information. Thank you so much. It's so enlightening. I have a question about the period of time that a person lives in a particular geographical area. So if I'm born in Sun Village in Antelope Valley, but I move to Westwood, am I going to live longer then?
Maybe.
What is the time period for the?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. We would need to have a different data set for that, about longitudinal, data that follows sort of one person. But the big drivers of big differences in life expectancy between population groups is the conditions of daily life. So of course, doctors and medicines are so important once we get sick, if we're injured, critically important component of the social determinants of health. But when you look at, again, big groups, it's, do people have access to healthy foods? Do they have a safe place to exercise? Do they have secure employment? Can they easily get to their job? Do they have toxic stress from racism or economic insecurity that are eroding their health? So arguably, if you're born in one place and then you move to a place that has much better social determinants of health, you'll probably live longer. Yes. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please, followed by Dr. Ferrer.
That was amazing.
Oh, thank
Actually,
you.
Thank you so much. When I look at that chart on who's disconnected in LA County, I look at a population that I certainly am focused on a lot, and that is the peaks, the tall little peaks on that chart.
Yeah.
And it's going to be Black women with children with less than a high school education who have not had a job in the last 5 years. And that's, a huge population of women desperately seeking help that I think should be one of our major targets, and giving them housing, giving them adequate income. I know that there's a movement at the federal level, albeit the people who tell me about it are a little chagrined that Trump is willing to look at it. The idea of passing laws of sustained income for this population, which I think they tried to get through in the last administration and could not. But I'm certainly in favor of that, although, yeah. And the idea that we can get, that they need to have more support, and I think that's so clear here because, they're not getting educated. They're not finding jobs. They don't find housing. And we tend, and they get stigmatized, and they get sucked into our system so quickly. Then they lose their kids, and it's just it's where I think we need to be focusing a lot of our support is in that population, and not condemning them, but figuring out how to support them. How can we help you, and et cetera. And I'm hoping that First Five can rise to that challenge and deal with those, particularly with those four areas.
Thank you.
Dr. Ferrer.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this is a devastating picture. But I appreciate you putting it together. And, I think what's most devastating is it's like longstanding. When I look at life expectancy for Black men, and this is, I guess, 2023, or those 5 years, the life expectancy for Black men in that 5-year period is actually lower than it is for white men 40 years ago. So, I mean, it's there's so much work to be done. I do just have a technical question because I'm trying to better understand the index.
Yeah.
You obviously collected a lot of other information within each of the domains.
Yes.
But you made a decision for the index calculations to use only one metric or two metrics in one case. Is that because there was a high correlation? Like, did you look at, so I'm going to just talk about prematurity for a second.
Yeah.
It's also an important indicator of the health of a community. Did you look at prematurity and found that it's tracking to life expectancy? I mean, all of the other measures that you included under sort of health and well-being, and then decided, for ease of understanding and compiling an indicator, it's better to just have a simpler set of metrics?
Yeah, exactly. It's
Okay.
better, because an index is in some ways an advocacy tool. It's something, so when it was developed at the UN by Amartya Sen and an economist, a chief economist at the World Bank, Mahbub al-Haq, they said they wanted to find something as blunt as GDP, something that could be talked about powerfully. And we found that the more you have to explain about an index, I mean, our explanations already are pretty long, and the more you have to explain, people just stop paying attention and, start internet shopping or whatever. And so it has to be simple. I think life expectancy at birth is something that people readily grasp. When we started doing this work in 2007, we considered using disability-adjusted life years, premature mortality, different things like that. they were much more difficult to explain, and also the data weren't available. What we can do now, because it's life expectancy, is it's pretty much, if we can get our hands on mortality data, we can calculate life expectancy down to quite a small place. And so this allows for comparisons over time and space. And again, when we did our first report, we found that like Asian women in New Jersey live 20 years longer than Native American men in South Dakota. And we were like, that's already enough. Like, we don't need to make it more complicated by having disability adjusted life years or a different proxy like that.
Yeah, I think where I'm struggling is the interventions to fix things
Yeah,
often require
Yeah.
the additional data.
for sure. And so we do try to put the additional data
Yeah,
in the
so
report.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's why the report is so big.
Yes, exactly. So the big, the index is like waving a flag and saying,
Yeah.
look over here.
Yeah, and then
And
you're looking over here.
then more research, more information is needed to understand why is it this way in this place and what can be done. And just to say one thing about your comment about Black life expectancy. One of the data walk participants said something so striking, and we have it in the report. She wrote, or she said, having been Black a long time in America, I just felt extremely sad at the life expectancy of Black males still. I used to call them an endangered species, and I see that they still are an endangered species. My own son died at 43. He had a serious mental illness. So, we have the numbers, but the voices that we were able to hear through the partnership with Best Start were just really amazing and really made the data really much more powerful, I think.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the report and all the work. And it's really helpful, actually, so thank you.
And given the voices, as you said, when I look at the agenda for action, and I think about my own lived experience, I guess what's missing for me, and maybe this is rhetorical, is the acknowledgement that the role racism plays in these things.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that neither of my parents made 80, and they were both advanced degree holders, property owners, earned more than six figures for most of their careers. What else? Had great pensions, had medical insurance. So, then why?
Yeah.
And it's racism.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to call out if we want to acknowledge those realities and change it when we look at the child wellness piece.
Yeah.
Because if, in the case of just my two parents, we acknowledge all those things that should have increased their indicators, they didn't.
Yeah.
So what led to them not making 80?
Yeah.
And I would argue it was the accumulative impact of being Black in America
Yeah.
for 79 years for both
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Madam McBride, Commissioner McBride.
Thank you for this report, the work that you've put into it, the presentation today. In that same vein, thank you Supervisor Mitchell. Yeah, the stress of racism kills. And as the mother of 5 Black sons, I don't take this data lightly. It's a story I'm well aware of, and it doesn't, when we think of life expectancy, I think we often think about the end, but not where it starts.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of us, we're hyper aware of that start when our babies are born premature or low birth weight or healthy, but not accessing or being able to access the same level of care. So thank you for that, Supervisor Mitchell. My question actually, I understand that this is a snapshot, and it really is a great snapshot, and so much data is here that I will be consuming over the coming weeks. And I know it's not meant to be a proof of causation, but when so you mentioned Culver City. I'm from Culver City. I'm aware that there's been shifts in the demographics, but a lot of that has to do with the cost of living going up and people being displaced. So where you have neighborhoods where there's displacement, it's not necessarily a true indication of the living conditions improving. It's just wealthier people are moving in, lower income people are moving out. So you have that displacement from already wealthy neighborhoods where people were already holding on to that, trying to survive. But then you have full-blown gentrification where there are neighborhoods where Black and Latino families are able to thrive, and then they're moved out because they're being displaced because of the gentrification. Is that an indicator in the report in any way?
So I can answer both comments in one. We definitely talk about racism in the health section quite a lot, and talk about, yeah, okay, great. And just talk about the, just things like even Black moms who have a graduate degree having higher rates of maternal mortality, than high school graduates who are from other racial and ethnic groups. So we do.
That it's also included in your call to action, so it's a reminder
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that should be our call to action, to
Yes.
do something about it.
Yes, yes, yes. And then in terms of your point, so this is right. One reason that scores can increase is because it's a different population. But there are also places where that hasn't happened. So Alex, you were telling me this the other day, that there were, yes. So I'm going to just let my colleague answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I don't know if this, okay. So basically, you can see in some of the, again, 200 pages in here, we talk about, for instance, educational indicators for Black Angelenos have improved. And that's not to say, though, that there's not been a huge cost of living crisis, and we do dedicate a section in the front in pages 62 to 63, just to the loss of so many Black residents of Los Angeles County that have left the county or moved to the, uphill to the valley because of the high cost of living. So it's a bit of both. There's definitely gentrification driving score increases in some neighborhoods, but with the county level data that we have, we do see that, those who remain in those Latino and Black communities are seeing improvement on health and education, or sorry, not health, COVID, for education and income indicators. So it's a mixed picture, but we do try to address that. And we also do have this map on page 57 that shows, sorry to give people, you'll see it on the website too. But anyway, where we do have maps that show where people live, and it speaks to the residential segregation that exists in the county too. So I hope that answered your question, Commissioner.
It does, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first is the slide on the median income for women, and where you see Latina women on the far left. Do you have that data disaggregated by U.S.-born Latinas and foreign-born Latinas?
We do,
You do?
yes.
So that would be interesting, just to
Yeah.
see how that differs. Because I've seen this number, right? I mean, we've seen this number in a number of different reports. I don't think I've ever looked into whether or not it's disaggregated. The other question I have is, I represent the city of LA, which is 40% of the county. Have you worked, I know that this is a county-based report with county-wide data, which is very helpful, but have you in the past worked with cities that, at our request, can ask for an additional analysis that can be applied that is city-specific in cases like LA County, where, again, we represent 40% of the county?
Yeah. Yeah, so two answers to that. One is the places that you see in all of our places map. It's cities, unincorporated areas, and then within the city of LA, the community plan areas, 34, 35 of those, just to break that up, so the city of LA is not one block. And the second, we're actually making a presentation to the city of LA on Monday, and we've been working with the workforce folks there and we created for them a bunch of maps of just the city of LA. We'll present them on Monday, but they also were using them for thinking of where to place workforce development sites. Yeah.
We're inviting all of our service providers on Monday, so it's our team that
Oh,
will be
great.
hosting
Oh,
you
okay,
Monday.
yeah.
So excited. I
Thanks.
was there yesterday with the presentations.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Very helpful.
I wanted to thank you again for the report. It's quite enlightening
Thank you.
And also that you mentioned about race, but I'd like to see more in that area in the action agenda. And also for foreign-born Latinas and Latinos, especially given these times today, we're not clear about that population. And the more data you can bring, the more relevant our services will be. And I know for many, they're not accessing services at this moment because of the danger that is involved. So I appreciate your work.
Thank you so much.
I agree. I would say to distinguish between foreign-born across the ethnic groups,
Yeah.
I think would be helpful. Where can members of the public or those of us who want copies for our staffs
Sure.
or our family or friends, where can it be?
So you can get it online at our website, Measure of America. You can download it. You can also download all the data that is underneath what we have there, and you can see a map that allows you to mouse over the map of LA and get the scores by place for health, education, income, and youth disconnection, as well as for the index as well. And Superintendent Mitchell, if you want some more copies, I'll give them to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Supervisor, thank you.
I'm opening it up. Ms. Vo, if we have any public comment for agenda item number 8?
Confirming there are no public comments for agenda item 8.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry I called you superintendent instead of supervisor.
I didn't even hear it. So
Okay.
we're all good. Thank you. All
Thank
I heard
you.
was you're going to help me get some books. That was
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's right. So driving this train is 3:30, so we're not going to take an official break. If you need to get up and go, feel free to do so. We're going to continue. I'm going to ask the next panel to come forward.
Yeah, that's true, that's not in there, yeah.
Maybe we can put in order. Okay, so I'll ask Deborah, but we should, you go after Carrie, and then Deborah.
Okay, so we're not taking a break. I hope people understood my point. We're not taking a break. We are continuing to move right into the panel. So I think the panelists are making their way up. And we'll ask the audience, no problem if you have to leave to use the restroom or whatever, but it would ask that you do so quietly because we're going to continue with the meeting.
I will do whatever you want me to do. Thank you, Deborah. And how are you? I don't think it's. Oh, yeah. We're on 36. So that you can be at the, I mean, be over there. Oh, let me scoot down. Yeah. Scooching over down. And then I'll hand it. Clicker?
And some sugar. I have 4 shots of espresso in there. Good to see you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
For
Madam
our next
Chair. Good
panel.
afternoon again. We are a little behind schedule on the presentation, and so I am going to ask if we could consider 10 minutes per presenter, which is, I think, what we had planned for LA County, but Veronica for LA City, if we could condense. And what we will do is we will allow for 1 or 2 questions after each presenter. So I'll give you a 2-minute when you begin, and that way, you know, we're wanting to leave time for public comment. So
And let me clarify that that based on the number of people who've signed up, we're going to give every member of the public 1 minute, so the public knows. Everyone will get 1 minute.
That is correct, just based on what we've already received via email as well as in person. In order to make it through the presentations and ensure that we still have quorum to conduct business, public comments will be given 1 minute as of right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone, for your understanding and flexibility. This item 10 is an information item that is going to focus on how key partners in LA County and LA City are responding to the federal instability while advancing a prevention infrastructure, really building on the two previous presentations. I'm really delighted to be joined by Carrie Miller, Dr. Miller, Senior Program Manager at Los Angeles County Policy Implementation and Alignment Branch. She's joined by her colleague, Christina Mesa, Executive Director of Poverty Alleviation for the Policy Implementation and Alignment Branch. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
We're good.
And also delighted to be joined by Deborah Coleman, Director at the LA County Office of Advancement for Early Childhood and Education. And Commissioner Marquez has given up her time so that Veronica McDonald, Assistant General Manager for the Community Services and Development Division, LA City Community Investment for Families Department, can present for LA City. So thank you, Commissioner. Please bear with us because we have now asked them to condense their presentations. Our presenters are going to highlight short-term intervention efforts in the Los Angeles County ecosystem for children and families. They're also going to share how they're operationalizing prevention and connecting the local federal response to long-term systems building. I'll be keeping time, and so I'll again give you a 2-minute warning or time, and if you can just hand over the place to the next speaker so that we can get input from our commissioners in the presentations. So I do want to begin with sharing context for this presentation. Our hope is, to consider the last two presentations, the February presentation. We want to take a step back and look at prevention not as a single program, but as infrastructure that helps families stay stable before challenges become crisis, and that allows systems to respond quickly and effectively when conditions shift. And I thought Kristen Lewis did such a beautiful job of defining prevention in their report, really, a humane approach that is efficient, impactful, and effective. And, as Chris shared, we continue to be in a moment of federal uncertainty. We're seeing funding instability, policy changes, and increasing pressures on the safety net. At the same time, families with young children are facing rising costs, housing insecurity, and barriers to early childhood and education and care. Against this backdrop, prevention matters most than ever, and we included how we at First 5 LA define prevention. We are defining prevention in our Prevention First initiative as ways in which we can keep families together with a focus on housing and poverty alleviation. For us, prevention means investing early in families' strengths, so thinking about strengths and connecting them to supports before challenges become crisis. It's a shared responsibility across families, communities, and public systems to protect children's well-being and opportunity. And in no time has this mattered more than now. So for us, we're committed to partnering deeply with our system partners and with networks that are centering children prenatal to age 5. So with this, I'll turn it over to Carrie to talk about the crisis intervention work that you have been doing at LA County. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm excited to be here. I would be remiss to not say, because I'm very excited to see the new 2026 version of this report, when Supervisor Mitchell put forth a board motion back in 2020. May 18th, 2021, there was a board motion that created the Poverty Alleviation Initiative. And when that strategic plan was put together, this book, the version, it was the 2018 is what I was thinking. The 2018 version of this book was highly influential in the creation of that plan. So how exciting to be presenting with the new version of this coming out. I'm sure we will do great things with this data. And so I just wanted to mention that. With that, we'll go ahead and now get to crisis intervention. So unfortunately, in January, there was a situation from the federal government that put a freeze on 3 of our large funding streams, which was the block grant, the CalWORKs, and the Child Care and Development Funds, which serve a great portion of our social services and our safety network. And so this was a big deal when these funds got frozen. There was immediate court action from the 5 states who were impacted by this, which put a temporary freeze, from which I understand is still in effect. Do you have something? You go for it. Do you have an update?
We have an update today that there has been a continued injunction.
Okay. So temporary good news.
Temporary.
And so with that, the really good news is we did not have to put forth the plan that I'm about to talk to you about today. However, it's important, and we do want to talk about it, because the fact is a lot of departments and external partners came together to create this plan in the event of any type of future emergency, whether that be a government shutdown, funding freezes, whether we end up with some bad news in this situation, whatever that is, partners came together and said, let's put together a plan of action of what we could do to shore up our children and families and our individuals who are in our poverty level, lower income thresholds, who really rely on and need these support services going forward. So as you can see, there's a list on the screen. I won't go through them all in the interest of time, but there was several county departments, many who are sitting around this table right now, as well as community partners, including First 5 LA, who really came together, worked with Abigail to put together a plan that we could shore up in the short term. So one of the things that we did to start is put out a survey to our community-based organizations and residents to say, if this freeze stays and is actually enacted, what are your main concerns and what are you most worried about in terms of the safety net, so that we could build something that spoke specifically to those resources. And interestingly, even though it's CalWORKs and it was not CalFresh funding, #1 impact was food insecurity. Hands down across the board, that's what we heard. Followed by housing insecurity, followed by child care, followed by health, mental health, and then decreased workforce and ability to access services. So with that, we needed to put together a plan. So we started with just looking at what are the existing supports and resources that are already in place, regardless of whether the funding freeze goes into effect, that we could a place we could send folks now. So again, there's a list here of a number of food assistance, housing assistance, child care supports, other types of direct services, which includes like 211 LA, that has a wide variety of different types of resources, information, places that people can go, as well as employment assistance. So these things are in existence now. They are good resources. They're not enough to cover the gap. If that funding freeze really did go into effect, this will not support it. But it's a step in the right direction, and it's a place that we could use and lean on as a starting place. So with that, we thought about, okay, so let's say if this does go into effect or any type of government shutdown, what could we do? So we looked at, in the short term, phase 1 would be 1 to 2 months. What are the types of resources we could lean on immediately to get us through a short gap if needed? what we used as criteria for this phase one were things that did not require funding. So they may require some infrastructure, they may require some extension of contracts, other types of pulling together resources and some work, but not things where we had to necessarily just come up with funding. And so as you see, again, there's food assistance avenues that we could leverage, direct assistance, a community campaign to make sure we get the word out to all residents and communities about what is available, how do you access it, where do you go, as well as we would do outreach not only to our community, but also to our faith-based community, our philanthropic community, other folks who can help, volunteer agencies who can help shore up if we were in a 1 to 2 month crisis, what that would look like. And then phase two is we were thinking like, okay, let's say this really goes on beyond that. Phase two includes 3 months and beyond. These are things that actually would require funding. So now we're into the, okay, these are supports where we could shore people up, where we know that the greatest need and the greatest supports are needed, but it would require funding. It would require more extensive work in terms of outreach, infrastructure, needs that we would have to do. But again, you can see under these same categories, for 3 months and beyond, not only food assistance, housing assistance, childcare, we really started looking at transportation supports, retail supports, other types of things that we would have to do if we were really in a crisis going beyond. And so with that, our next steps at this point is we know that there is a benefits cliff that's going to hit sometime this summer. We don't know exactly where that's going to look, but it is coming. And so with that, we have a plan to start food distribution in April to get ahead of it. We don't want to wait for the problem to hit before we start shoring people up, because again, going back to the survey, food insecurity was the #1 issue, and we know when people start to get nervous, they're going to immediately start looking at where are my food resources. So we are going to get ahead of that with some existing resources we have left over from when the first government shutdown occurred in 2025. We're going to start deploying those in April and consistently throughout the end of the calendar year to make sure that we are able to help people get what they need before the benefit hit, and then when the cliff hits, have a place to go where they can get those resources and access them. And we will continue to evaluate the conditions. We're looking for if there's any change in that, what happens, are there new issues that come? We know that right now benefits are covered through September 30th. We don't know what's going to happen on October 1st. So we're trying to get ahead of that. We're trying to think ahead and figure out what's the best way to deploy the very limited resources we have, but in a way that really helps meet the needs of our communities. And with that, I will turn it over to Christina.
Thanks so much, Carrie, and good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to join you this afternoon. It's been a minute since I was here last to share some updates relative to the Poverty Alleviation Initiative, but I would be remiss to not acknowledge our first Executive Director, Carrie, and just for context, Poverty Alleviation is one of the units that sits within the branch that Carrie leads, and we actually have a lot of benefits that you will see because of where we sit within the CEO's office that we will be sharing. So there's two primary updates that I wanted to lift up. One is in direct correlation to what Carrie just presented on, and that is how we were able to leverage our new PAI dashboard that was released last year to help respond in real time to food needs and food crises. And then we will also talk about our guaranteed income efforts. Poverty Alleviation does quite a bit of work in the guaranteed income space in partnership with a lot of the folks that are here. So we'll give some updates on the work that's happening there. Okay. Starting first with the dashboard. So since we've last connected, I think the update that we shared was we were planning to release a dashboard. We have now officially released that dashboard. It is Poverty Alleviation's dashboard. There's a QR code here if folks want to follow along and get access to it. But what it looks at is poverty rates across the county of Los Angeles and poverty rates at 3 different measures. So we look at poverty, of course, at the federal poverty level, but we also look at it at 200% of the federal poverty level, which is the typical threshold for eligibility criteria for a lot of our safety net programs. And then we also look at it at 266% of the federal poverty level, because a lot of experts argue that that is a much more accurate reflection of how folks are experiencing poverty
Could
here
you
in
could you tell us
California.
what those three poverty levels are in like real dollars?
Yeah,
Or whatever family size?
I'm going to do my best because I think it's also important, to your point, to note that it hasn't changed in over 35 years, the federal poverty level. Yeah, for a family of four, I believe it's $21,000 a year, close to about $21,000 a year for the federal poverty level. So when we talk about 200%, we're talking about double that income. In addition to that, we were also able to work with ISD, one of our fellow county departments. They have a geographic information systems team to parse down at the neighborhood level, not just how folks are experiencing poverty, right, where there's high concentrations of poverty at the neighborhood level, but in addition to that, break that down based off of demographic criteria. So we have a few different levers here that folks can pull from. So folks can look at poverty for 0 to 3 or 0 to 5. Which I know is really relevant. That was an ask for, from our friends here. So you can look at poverty for children. You could look at it for TAY, transitional aged youth, which we worked on with DCFS. You could also look at poverty for women and men, how there's gender disparities amongst poverty. You could look at poverty rates amongst our seniors or our older populations above the age of 65. And then we also have some levers around race and ethnicity data as well. One of the other elements that we've been able to integrate in this dashboard was something called the California Poverty Measure. So our friends at Stanford and PPIC created a measure that looks at how poverty might increase if we lost certain aspects of our safety net. So as you're toggling through this, there's actually a layer that you could add on called the California Poverty Measure, and you could see how poverty might increase if we were to lose, for instance, our CalFresh program or our CalWorks program, which is a helpful tool when there are federal threats, right, to some of the funding streams that support these safety net programs. So folks can see in real time, right, how even a temporary loss of funding to TANF might show up at the community level, how many folks are at risk and what that means for poverty in that local region. In addition to this, we've also been able to pull administrative data, and that's where I get to show you an example in real time. So we are able to work with our partners over at the Chief Information Office, which also sits in Carrie's branch. And again, this is part of that benefit of working within this team. They're able to pull data through InfoHub, which is a center to be able to collect data across different county departments to allow us to better evaluate whether or not the services we're rendering are effective in addressing some of the root causes and issues that we're trying to overcome. And so with that, we've been able to pull in data from our friends over at DPSS, and we were able to pull in all of our CalFresh caseload data to see, you know, during the federal government shutdown last fall, where all of our CalFresh recipients were. And there were certain pockets of our community that had high concentration of the population of CalFresh recipients, meaning of that local population, more than 30% were receiving CalFresh. So we were able to target food distribution where we pushed out extra food because we knew where the impact was. We were also able to overlay this data with the 900 plus food pantries that you saw Carrie mention in her presentation. So that way we were strategic in which pantries we were giving that additional food to. So similarly, we will prepare as there's anticipated benefit cliffs, as was mentioned, starting this summer as immigrants start to lose their CalFresh benefits, unfortunately, and then we've got folks that are now going to be subject to work requirements who might lose their food benefits. So we're mapping out as we speak where those folks are across the county so we can use similar methodology to be strategic in how we distribute food. Okay. Guaranteed income. So the last I presented, I shared that we were advocating for dollars to support guaranteed income work for our general relief population. At that time, we were seeking dollars specifically from Measure A. We had some data to help us with that advocacy work, so I've got a snapshot of some of that data for you here. And what this shows you is how the general relief caseload has increased year over year, month over month, going all the way back to 2018 through, I believe it's December of 2024. And what you'll see is that our caseload went from around 60, 70,000, which was pretty stagnant for expectations around what our general relief caseload would look like pre-pandemic, to increasing and not recovering during and post-pandemic. So now our caseload sits steady at around 120,000 folks every single month. Of those individuals, I think it's really important to share, especially with the data presentation that just happened, 67% of them are Black and Latino single adult men. Of those, the majority of them are between the ages of 26 and 49, what we often refer to as working-aged adults. And of those, 68 to 73% are actively experiencing homelessness. So what you see here are the caseloads. In blue represents the number of the total caseloads that are actively experiencing homelessness month over month. This actually, we did some correlation analysis, and it aligns almost to the T with the data that we pull from the point-in-time count year over year. So rise in homelessness is likely contributing to the rise that we're seeing in our general relief caseload. We were successful in advocating for some guaranteed income dollars. It's not much, but we will be piloting some work to do guaranteed income for our general relief recipients starting next year, next fiscal year. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And we believe that this is a pathway to be able to sustain guaranteed income in county infrastructure. We'll be able to serve about 700 folks. The downside is we'll only be able to serve TAY and older adults, because those were the two priority populations that were pulled from that Measure A bucket of dollars that we were able to get. But we are working towards expanding that so we can include the bulk of our caseload, which are those working-aged adults. We also just are, in this month, wrapping up guaranteed income for our foster youth that were in our care. So we expanded our BREATHE program, which is our infrastructure that allows us to facilitate guaranteed income in the county. And we expanded it in late 2024 to include all foster youth in our care between the ages of 18 and 20. So thank you to the Department of Children and Family Services for identifying the funds for that work. And we served over 2,200 foster youth for 18 months, and that is concluding this month.
Thank you, Christina. Well, I couldn't have been set up better for talking about, now that we know the situation that is at hand and how poverty is impacting the residents of LA County, what are some strategies to really ensure that our workforce has childcare to be able to be a part of our economy, get to work in school, and we have early learning programs to support our next workforce. So I'm pleased to share an overview of our infant and toddler early care and education systems blueprint. So in September 2023, the LA County Board of Supervisors directed the Office for the Advancement of Early Care and Education, along with the Department of Economic Opportunity, to look at the issues that currently had gone from critical to severe on our infant toddler infrastructure. For several years, we've had a lack of capacity for infants and toddlers in our early care and education system. In fact, currently we only have capacity in licensed childcare to serve 13% of the children in our county. We know with the expansion of transitional kindergarten and the impact it has had on our non-school district, community-based childcare providers, and the shift in their business model, that our infant and toddler programs are at even more risk. So I'm grateful for the Board of Supervisors to put us to task to create this motion, and delivered a report back in March 2024. So how did we come to this report? We convened over 50 meetings and 300 stakeholders consisting of parents, early care and education providers, colleges, universities, experts in early care and education, and government entities. In fact, many of the people in this room were a part of those conversations, and it was stewarded by the LA County Policy Roundtable for Child Care and Development, as well as the local Child Care and Development Planning Council. Now, how can one use this blueprint? So It's really seen as a tool to support program design in community organizations, a guide for philanthropy to make investments. It also can be used as a tool for advocates when they are speaking to elected officials, and of course, recommendations for our local, state, and federal elected officials as well. So this led to many recommendations. We actually reduced it down to our top 20. If you would like to read the full report, it is available on our website at childcare.lacounty.gov. I believe also the link is in your packet. And there is a brief, if you'd like a snapshot, and then a full report that has all of the data that leads into it. So to get us started, let's look at the 5 priority areas. The first area is really around capacity and infrastructure, then access to affordable care, program operations, supporting workforce compensation, and workforce pathways, as well as qualifications. So I'm going to highlight where there is some movement on this blueprint and where there are opportunities to lean in for First Five, for community partners, and for philanthropy and government agencies as a whole. So I'm really excited actually to share that one of the strategies in capacity and infrastructure, knowing that there's not enough licensed capacity for all of our infants and toddlers, is making some local movement. In fact, on Tuesday, there was not a motion, but I think a action passed by the LAUSD School Board to think about our birth through 5 system. And the Office for the Advancement of Early Care and Education will be supporting LAUSD in thinking about how to bring infant and toddler spaces onto shuttered or unused school district campuses. So thinking about capacity, how do we make more infrastructure for our early childhood workspace? So very excited about that work starting to move forward. There are also several opportunities to think about both programmatically and on the advocacy front to support capacity and infrastructure. For example, as a program, there could be grants for startup costs, especially for family child care homes, to begin to expand so we can increase our infrastructure. Also, thinking about regulatory changes at the state level that could be made for family child care homes. So currently, family child care homes can only serve a certain amount of infants and toddlers, no matter what their staff capacity. But with the shift going on and more of our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds moving to transitional kindergarten, how can we rethink our system for infants and toddlers in family child care? Also reassessing the square footage with community care licensing around what's needed for infant and toddler care so we can make the most out of our capacity. And finally, an innovative idea about requiring new housing developments or commercial developers to, one, either pay a fee to support the building of infant and toddler care, or to actually create a space in any new building that could be used for infant and toddler care. Moving on to affordability of care, this is really where we heard from folks that infant and toddler care is hard to locate and it's expensive. So thinking about how we can ease the location and access of payment for that support. So we've made a great deal of movement really in partnership with CFCI funding that came out of Measure J, because childcare is an upstream way to impact the justice system and reduce incarceration. So we do have a countywide campaign currently that serves as a hub for access to childcare across the county in partnership with the County Office of Education, with First Five LA, as well as all of our child care resource and referral agencies. We do have a partnership hub where families can go to a one-stop click and not only find out about what kind of settings are available, but click into links on how to get access to locate childcare as well as accessing payment or getting assessment for payment. And you can find out more about that at childcarelacounty.gov. Now, also strengthen the capacity of our county staff. I know this has come up many times with the Board of Supervisors to be able to support county staff in navigating families to childcare. And we have a training program that launched a little over a year ago, and we've trained already over 500 county and community staff as navigators in the childcare system, really acting as that warm handoff. Also funding locally funded childcare. We have a voucher program in the zip codes with the highest incarceration rates. So really focused on South LA and Watts in partnership with Crystal Stairs. That program is at capacity with over 140 children enrolled in child care payment vouchers. Another opportunity that has not been leaned into is revising regulations to ensure that infant and toddler early care and education workforce are categorically eligible for subsidized child care. Moving on to our third area, we will go quickly because I have 2 minutes left. I have to elevate First 5 LA in really supporting, I'm sorry. This is all work that is happening right now and is in process, really thinking about how to reduce operations, whether it's building partnerships with family, friends, and neighbors, aligning the infant toddler age range with community care licensing, really thinking innovatively about program operations. When we're speaking about our workforce, we'll highlight First 5 LA and expanding its guaranteed basic income program for family, friends, and neighbors, and that's where First 5 has really stepped up into this cause. Also, there's a lot of movement going on currently about rate reimbursement. And finally, thinking about our workforce pathways and qualifications. The one area that I will highlight is the work that's being done through the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity. I'm pleased to share that a first of its kind America Job Center has been established countywide. It's located in Pomona with a focus on the early care and education workforce. Oh, and I've been so focused, I haven't been clicking through. So sorry. Okay. So happy to take questions at the end or to speak with anyone afterwards about all of the recommendations that are in this report, movement that's going on, or opportunities that could be really taken up. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And we've got our last presenter, and I'm really needing to make sure that we transition over to public comment before 4:15. Given the number of members who want to comment.
Okay, so I might have to then hold the update on the hubs work, so just, if that's okay. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, here it goes. Can you hear me? No? Thank you for having me today. Veronica McDonough, I'm the Assistant General Manager for the Community Investment for Families Department, and I'm really honored to be here this afternoon with all of you to share more information about our work and what we're doing on the ground. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge and thank our General Manager, Abigail Marquez, your Commissioner, and to uplifting the work that we do every day in the city of Los Angeles. I am going to skip through some of these slides because I do know we've had a wonderful presentation about all of the data and some of the survey that Christina Miller had shared, and it's the same thing that we're hearing on the ground with the families that we work with in the city of Los Angeles. But we do know families are struggling to stay afloat. And so what we have done is we have been really intentional about how we are designing our programs to address some of the federal uncertainty that we are experiencing. We know that families are concerned about health care. They're concerned about access to food, as Carrie talked about, and Christina, child care. And so everything seems to, it fits, right? Like everything that everyone has talked about. And so we're really excited to be part of these conversations and have our centers doing some of this work. So we fund 19 family source centers in the city of Los Angeles. These are place-based, community-based organizations, and they're trusted community hubs that are delivering services on the ground to families to address these various areas. And so some of the areas that they're focusing on right now, especially given the federal uncertainty, is strengthening healthcare access. So the way we are doing this is our family source centers, we've incorporated into their contracts multi-benefit screenings. So we're assessing where their needs are. Do they qualify for any income supports? Do they need to renew their applications to make sure that they maintain it? But we also acknowledge that they may lose it. And so what can we do to help support that? All of our family source centers have integrated healthcare services into their organization. So they either have co-located partners that are there certain days out of the week, or they are also providing pop-up events at their centers that we have integrated into our work. So they're doing oral health checkups, eye exams, health screenings, to help address those needs should families lose those benefits. We are also increasing access to food. All of our family source centers are food distribution sites. They distribute food weekly, and we have distributed over 38,000 groceries to families in need this last year alone. We are also improving childcare access, and so I would be remiss if I didn't thank the First Five board and team. You helped support our Starting Strong toolkit. This toolkit was designed to help individuals and childcare centers that were interested in opening more centers throughout the city of Los Angeles to increase that access to affordable childcare. So this helps navigate the process, and so I couldn't thank you more for helping do this. And I'll leave us some copies so you can see the finished product if you haven't already, or you could also find it on our website at laforfamilies.org. We are also working to improve our family support and economic stability. So for us, we know that housing is a huge issue of concern. Families are concerned without that housing, everything else is impacted. So we have incorporated within our family source centers a program called Solid Ground. This is a homelessness prevention strategy. And what we do is we work with families. We've incorporated into our intake questions if they are behind on their rent, how much are they behind, what other types of resources that they might need. We've integrated financial coaching and different financial capability programs as part of that work so that we could help sustain them. We're looking at increasing their assets. So we know that families, if they have to relocate, one of the things they do is they look at your credit report. We want to make sure our families have good credit, they're reducing their debt, they're saving. And so these are things that our family source centers are working on to support families. And not only do they do that, but they provide a lot of other wraparound services for families. We're focused in 3 primary areas. Essential services, like I mentioned, financial capability, and then we also provide youth services. We do this through a 2-generational approach at all of our family source centers. And so you can see the list of services here. In addition to that, we're providing limited financial assistance to households, and so this is everything from rental assistance to if a car breaks down and they need to get to work, we'll help repair that. If they need to access documents and there's a fee, we'll support those efforts as well. And we've also integrated some of our income support programs, our guaranteed income programs. We launched Big Leap, where we distributed over $1,000 to 3,200 individuals a couple of years ago, and so we're really excited about that work, and now we have we're leading a guaranteed income for transitional age youth and individuals that have experienced intimate partner violence. And we're also getting ready to launch the city's United Housed LA, where we will provide rental assistance for seniors and individuals with disabilities. So we're providing a lot of various income support programs, but I think the beauty of our Family Source Center and their ability to work with community is that we have been able to serve over 55,000 individuals this last year, and that's unduplicated. We've also have, as I mentioned, with the financial assistance we've provided, we've helped them with $5.18 million worth of financial assistance, and $1.6 million for emergency assistance. During the immigration enforcement, we worked closely with the mayor and with the county to get resources to families that needed the resources the most, and we were able to distribute the 1.6. We have also helped families increase their household income by $28.1 million, and I mentioned how we have nearly supported families with grocery assistance for up to $38,000. We've integrated taxes. We know that this is also a form of income. Our Family Source Centers are VITA sites. They have helped over 15,000 individuals file their taxes and secured over $12.4 million in tax credits. And so we're really proud of the work that they have done. What makes them unique is that they also hire community. And so these families, and this is what creates the sustainability. So as we're concerned about this federal uncertainty, families that work in community, or families at our Family Source Centers work in the community, and they hire promotoras to reach out to the community and provide all of these services and make sure that they are aware and connecting them to those resources. And so I know I rushed through that. I was trying to get through quickly as possible, but thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share this afternoon.
I appreciate all of you, and really, we're going to have you give a little piece, because I know so much of the public was here to hear about this piece as well, so why don't you go ahead. I think we don't have to read the written public comment we've received. We just acknowledge receipt of it, so that might save us some time.
That is correct. We're planning to pivot to that.
Perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So thank you so much for all of your presentations. We have been working on building a hubs framework model to support our community's work. And so high level, because I presented in February, we are continuing to do the analysis of current public investments and private investments that are located in some of the areas where we are seeing concentrated need. And so that work is happening. We're also taking the reflections and findings from the report, the assessment on the 15-plus year investment of Best Start, and looking at the core components that we want to make sure continue in the next phase of our community investments work, but also acknowledging that the cost and the sustainability is a challenge given our fiscal reality and the long-term financial plan. And we are committed, so thank you for your presentation, because the community rooted hubs that we're building, we're taking into account not just the safety net, but community voice, policy advocacy, and how we're partnering with other systems, and making sure that we're not duplicating services, but that we're really building so that we can have a greater impact. And last thing is, we want to make sure that we are thinking about who our commission is, all of the tables that we're sitting at, so that we can really make sure that we're aligning and making those connections. The question that we wanted to ask the board is, we've talked about prevention, right? And we know that it's impactful, effective, right, efficient. So what are the design? What do you want us to consider in terms of prevention and the design? And this is what we can come back to when we meet again, given just the challenges that families are facing and the landscape, the context that we heard about today. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair Mitchell.
I appreciate that. Let's make sure that we put the question at the top of our agenda for the next meeting to remind us. And we will get back to that because I'm sure commissioners have lots of thought on that, and we want to hear them. With that, any brief questions or comments from commissioners?
Can I ask a question to include in the?
You sure can.
Because I have a question in response to this question, and my question is, how do you distinguish between crisis response and true prevention when you're prioritizing where the resources are allocated?
Excellent.
Will, yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
make note of it, and we'll include it in our future conversations. Anything else anybody wants to put on the table for consideration or discussion when we come back to this? Nothing? Okay, beautiful. With that, thank you all for the presentations. Let me just say that this whole meeting has been chock full of data. I don't know about you all, but my brain hurt. That was a lot. With that, I'm going to roll into, Ms. Vo, you're going to help me with our public comment. We've acknowledged that our written public comment will become a part of our official record, and we're going to open it up to public comment. You're going to call the names of those who've submitted speakers cards.
That is correct. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm going to begin with the in-person public comments. As I call your name, please create a line right here next to Ruth, and she'll help keep you in order as we begin the public comment section. Sylvia Rodriguez, Magdalena Casares, Whitney Hammock, Michelle Burton, Mercedes Gamble, Cynthia Sanchez, James Swazo, Hattie McFrazier, Glenda Lenars, Irene Ojeda, and Carla Garzon. With that, we'll begin with Sylvia Rodriguez. There will be 1 minute on the timer.
Esfuerzos de equidad en la vivienda. Hola, mi nombre es Silvia Rodríguez. Como representada de Bebés Star Región 1, ya que somos más de 1,000 miembros de la comunidad y aliados, por los últimos 5 años hemos estado implementando esfuerzos para mejorar los sistemas de vivienda en todo el condado de Los Ángeles. Esto incluye colectar datos comunitarios sobre las necesidades de vivienda y presentar a personas de poder y participar en coaliciones locales y estatales para implementar estrategias que apoyen a nuestros hijos de 0 a 5 años. Estas personas y grupos nos han compartido que la información y recomendaciones que compartimos les ha ayudado a tener un mejor entendimiento de lo que vivimos día a día para poder abogar más por recursos para nuestras comunidades. Estamos alineados con el plan estratégico de FISFI y sería una gran pérdida de trabajo, esfuerzos, recursos y si cortan esta inversión que está dando frutos para mejorar las condiciones sistemáticas que apoyan a niños de 0 a 5 años. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Magdalena Casares.
Hola, mi nombre es Magdalena, represento Besta Región 1, somos multimiembros de la comunidad de aliados. Hemos estado fortaleciendo el sistema de salud y bienestar a través del condado de Los Ángeles y Estados Unidos. De 2021 colaboramos con el Hospital de Niños para implementar nuestro modelo promotoras para mejorar sus servicios y prácticas para que sean más equitativas, culturalmente accesibles a familias marginadas con niños vulnerables que no tienen confianza al sistema de salud. Antes de la colaboración CHLA tenía una tasa de conexión entre pacientes y recursos del 26%. Con el apoyo tras un año de implementación, alcanza forma constante una tasa de conexión del 85%. Gracias a esos logros, la Academia Nacional de Medicina nos ha invitado que seamos parte del Concilio Nacional para capacitar instituciones académicas y de ciencias y adoptar nuestras mejores prácticas para ayudar y crear confianza a comunidades marginadas de todo el país. Estamos alineados al plan estratégico de FIFRAI y sería una gran pérdida de trabajo y esfuerzos y recursos si cortan esa inversión. Gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Casares. Whitney Hammock.
To the first 5 LA Board of Commissioners, my name is Whitney Hammock, and I started out as a concerned parent and resident. My journey with Best Start began 7 years ago when I walked into my very first Best Start meeting. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was pregnant with my daughter and I had a 2-year-old son. I knew I wanted more for my children and had to be the voice for them. So I was asked to attend a meeting by my home visitation program director. She saw the passion I had for the betterment of my children and thought Best Start would be a fit for me. Once I walked through those doors, I remember saying, this is what I want to do with my life. I always knew I wanted help to add to the community I live in, but didn't know how I would do it. Every time I walked into a Best Start meeting, I was heard. I was connected to services I didn't know existed. I was given information needed to help me and my children succeed. I was taught skills that would benefit me to this day. I was motivated. My children have been able to grow up knowing what leadership looks like and what giving back looks like and what advocating for themselves and what right looks like.
Thank you, Ms. Hammock.
Thank you, that's your minute.
So much.
Michelle Burton.
You can give it to us in written format. Next witness, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Michelle Burton. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, born in South LA. I have raised and buried children in the county, and although I'm the CEO of Rising Communities, I come here as a witness to say that these are amazing programs, and the transitions that have to happen, I understand, are necessary, but they can happen with less harm. And so the folks that are here to say that they've invested their time, their talent, their blood, their sweat, their tears, and they're hoping that that's taken into consideration so that there is a just transition of the current programs into this other model. And so today and moving forward, we want to keep them informed, we want to stand in solidarity with them, and we want to be a part of that change as opposed to being on the fringes of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burton. Mercedes Gamble.
Dear First 5 Commanders, my name is Mercedes, and I'm writing to you not only as a community member, but as a mother. As a GBM mom, I want to take the moment to express how important this is. The program supporting early childhood development, family, well-being, and community service continue to be prioritized. As parents, we are raising the next generation, and the support available during the child's earliest years makes a lasting difference in their development. Their confidence in their future. These programs provide families with guidance, resources, and a sense of community that strengthens both parents and children. I respectfully ask that you consider continuing the founding for at least one more year. Extending, that's it?
That's it, 1 minute. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cynthia Sanchez.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Sanchez, and I'm a leader with Best Start Antelope Valley Region 5 and part of Best Start United. I ask you to invest in the current Best Start programs as part of the new hub model for families with young children. Please provide our communities with a meaningful 18-month transition period. Best Start changed my community of Antelope Valley for the better. Pregnant mothers and parents with young children receive tools, education, and support without barriers related to income, insurance, or immigration status. As a mother of a young child, I gained knowledge about child development, nonviolent parenting, and how to advocate at the policy level. This learning continued with leadership skills, community organizing, and parent engagement. Through this experience, I shared knowledge with other mothers and supported families in my community. I grew into a confident community advocate that you see now. Today, I lead in my community, and I started my own nonprofit. Best Start opened the door for parents like me to step forward, lead, and support other families. I am forever grateful and thankful to Best Start AV for the support and empowerment to find my passion and become the best mom possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is James Suazo. My pronouns are he and him. I am the Executive Director of Long Beach Forward and get to work with the amazing leadership team of Best Start Central Long Beach, and we're here today alongside Best Start United as well with our other sister sites. I want to echo the concerns and the opportunities that many of the parent leaders here are lifting up, not only to ask for, one, a meaningful transition and a just transition, but also for real authentic community engagement. I think listening to the data presentations, there's a lot of opportunity to pull out real partnership as we're thinking about how do we best be resourceful with the real fiscal reality. I will say firsthand experience, both in Long Beach and so many other sites across LA County for Best Start. When we faced that EBT cliff a couple months ago, it was the parents and caregivers in this room that were the most resourceful in making sure that not only their communities, but everybody else was taken care of. And I think we have that opportunity here. The other reality of our fiscal cliff is that we have 3 months left of our current Best Start work, and we have lots of parents and community groups that are wondering what are the next steps. So please consider a meaningful transition. Thank you.
Good afternoon, honorable commissioners. My name is Hattie McFrazier. I have been a resident in West Hamptons for over 45 years. I have supported First Five since the beginning of its inception in the end of the 90s and a part of Best Start. I'm asking you to continue to invest in our current Best Start networks, projects, and campaign rather than create a new structure. We understand that reducing smoking rates have declined, which affect Proposition 10 tax. However, children are our #1 concern, and it's important that we in the community realize how important our 0 to 5 students are and children are, and also that their social, economic, and environment are important to their lives. Best Start provides a system approach that is community-centered, which addresses community issues such as systematic racism, target underserved population, health and safety, and one thing that we should always remember, that it takes a village to raise a child.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Glenda Linares. I'm a mother of an 8-month-old and a 27-year-old, and I've had the privilege to work alongside community leaders in both Region 1 and 2. I've witnessed firsthand the power, the impact of the families and children who have been impacted through the funding of Best Start. Some of these programs guaranteed basic income to 100 moms, delegate meetings, promotora model, participatory grant making. A mentor of mine who's no longer here, Ruth Bigaho, a child advocate, used to say that every family, every parent deserves a village. Best Start has been that village for many parents in these communities. And now, more than ever, with ICE rates, these families need a Best Start community. I urge you to do a just transition and provide 18 months. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Irene Ojeda y soy líder. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Irene Ojeda, soy líder de la comunidad de West Willebrew y estoy acá para agradecer a First Five Los Ángeles y a Best Start West Willebrew que conocí hace 10 años y agradezco porque han apoyado a mi hijo de 10 años y también mi hijo tuvo la experiencia con First Five Los Ángeles, visitas a casa. Al año y medio se graduó y eso le ha ayudado y él está en la high school y tiene una educación avanzada. Ha sido graduado de honores primaria, middle school y está en la high school y está estudiando medicina y ciencia y ahorita ya entra al quirófano, está en la medicina, está muy entusiasmado. Por eso le doy gracias a First Five Los Ángeles y a Best Start. Gracias.
Beautiful.
Honorable Chair and distinguished commissioners, my name is Carla Garzon. I am the manager for place-based strategies at All for Kids, representing Best Start Region 5. I want to say thank you for the investment of the last 15 years, but I also want to give recognition to all of these beautiful faces. I see my mom in every single one of these women standing here today. Only they know the struggle of being low income, being an immigrant mother, making a living somehow, some way, figuring it out alongside my dad. Only they know the struggle. When I look at these women, when I look at these parents, these families that come in through our doors, I like to give them the space and the platform to tell us what they need in their community. That wouldn't be possible without the investments that First Five LA has made in the last 15 years. I hope that we can continue to see an investment in the current Best Start regions as we transition into this new model, because doing so is an investment in communities who have shown up to do the work for the last 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now pivot to Zoom public comments. First one is Commissioner Bruce Boyden. Commissioner Bruce Boyden, you will now have the ability to speak.
Good afternoon, Supervisor. I'm so happy to join you today. I wish I could have been there in person, but you know, children have to be served, schools have to be open, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I come today really to talk about two specific projects. And these are the projects that we are supporting in South Central Los Angeles and Region 2. The one is we are serving 100 mothers in the 4 communities within Region 2 with a guaranteed income of $500 a month for I think the last 2 years. I know of no other greater program that's going to change children's lives than that of those who are being supported through Best Start. I'm asking that the commissioners consider supporting Best Start as long as we can.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Sophia Chim. Sophia Chim, you have the ability to speak.
Good afternoon, Honorable Commissioner. My name is Sophia Chim. I am serve as the leadership team member with Best Start Central Long Beach, and I'm also a proud mother of 3 young children. Being part of Best Start leadership team has been a meaningful journey for me. It has helped me to grow both personally and professionally, strengthening my interpersonal and leadership skills while working alongside diverse community leaders in Long Beach. Best Start empower parents like me to become engaged leaders and advocate for our community, our family, neighborhood. It builds trust and creates a way for parents to contribute their voice and experience in shaping programs that support young children. I respectfully urge you to continue investing in the current Best Start infrastructure and provide a meaningful 18-month transition period to protect community trust and sustain possible outcomes for families. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chim. And Madam Chair, before I hand this back to you, if I just may remind the public, if you didn't get an opportunity to speak today for public comments, please do email me. I will ensure that our Board of Commissioners does receive your public comments after today's board meeting. And with that, I will hand this back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vo. Ms. Vo, I'd like to also echo your thanks and express appreciation to all the members of the public. And please, if you had written public testimony, take her up on her offer, send it in so it can be distributed to all the commissioners. Thank you very much, commissioners. Today's meeting stands adjourned. I appreciate you all.
Wow.